Hey now. Hey now, hey now. We should be live here. Okay. And hopefully we're live on both Twitch and YouTube. That's the test. Okay. Let's see. And then I have my multi-stream chat. Hello there, Chewy Badista. See, that's my first ever chat on stream from YouTube, because I see the little YouTube icon there. Hello, how's it going? All right, so that actually confirms I was about to head to my YouTube channel to see if I was live or not. We are indeed live on YouTube. I know I'm live on Twitch. That's like my stomping grounds. I don't need to check that. Okay, I'm going to send a message on Twitch and see what it looks like mixed in there. Okay, so there's a little Twitch icon next to me. Well, welcome to the stream, Chewy Batista. If you could do me a big favor, can you tell me, can you see the message from me? And I don't mean on the screen. Like you could definitely see it up there. I mean, like in the chat room. Can you see that? We are going to be reading The Fellowship of the Ring today. We'll be officially starting reading in a little while, but for right now I want to just continue setting everything up. Going live is the easy part, even though that was the part that stymied me 2 weeks ago when I tried to do it with Sid and with Matt. My governor, Ellen Silla Newman, Omantil Elvo. Hello there, Shepherd of the Forest. How's it going? Welcome to the stream. You see the message in the chat. You see no message in the chat. Okay. But you do see it like on the screen, I'm sure, like up there above Bilbo's door. There's a message for me that says test. Okay, so that's cool. So the Twitch chat doesn't see the YouTube chat. And the YouTube chat doesn't see the Twitch chat. But all of it will appear on the screen. That's good. So in that case, if at any point I'm answering a direct question from chat, I will do everybody the big favor of reading it back so that people know what I'm responding to. We were supposed to do this dual streaming adventure 2 weeks ago with Matt and Sid for the Council of Tolkien, and I couldn't get it to work. It was not working, and eventually Sid said to me, why don't we just do it the normal way, and then we could figure it out later, and that's what happened. That's what happened. And after the stream, me and my friend Alice, who is a moderator on the YouTube end, so they're going to be keeping an eye on things there. They're also a moderator on the Twitch end. But they tested it with me when I got it all running. Let me go ahead and just get the word out in my usual spaces that we're live, like Discord and all that. Oh, who messaged me? Oh, it's not a message. Okay. All right. Oh, I need a link to my own YouTube channel, don't I? Let me go grab that. Because I want to post both links. Because some people prefer Twitch and some people prefer YouTube. It looks good and sounds good on YouTube. Okay, how the quality is good? It should be like 720p, which is fine for a middle-aged guy sitting here reading to you. It doesn't need to be you know, crazy high quality. Oh, okay, here it is. I can see that I can grab the... Oh, shut up. I just told myself to shut up. Okay. All right. Yeah, because I want to make sure both links are in my alert message that I'm going to post on social media. All right. And if this goes well, we'll be doing it more often. We'll certainly be doing it at least twice a month for reading streams and also for... the Council of Tolkien, but we might expand it if this is popular, and I think it will be. Hey, Alice, I see you there. Yeah, it's been working. So, is that icon? Okay, the wrench icon is that you're a moderator, and the other icon must be that you're a member. It doesn't show the Gandalf G rune through Streamlabs, but I'm sure it shows up on YouTube's end. Okay, alright, yeah, let me just continue to post everywhere. So, William Stone there, aka Alice, that's my moderator on the YouTube end, so if you have any kind of issues, you could go to them. They'll be keeping an eye on things, making sure that everybody's just, behaving normally, or as normally as a bunch of Tolkien fans do when they're all together, because let's face it, we get a little bit weird at times, which, it's a good weird, though. It's definitely a good weird. There's good weird, and there's bad weird. And there's no reason that we have to be bad weird. We'll only be good weird. Alright, now just social media, and we'll get everything set up. I will be killing the music when we're reading. For anybody who hasn't been to a reading stream, this is just so that I have something playing while I'm doing all the setup stuff. Once we start reading, it is not going to have music, because that would be annoying, I think. Some people actually play music while they read, and they'll come up with certain soundtracks to read certain books, and I've heard people talk about that kind of thing. Oh, send a test message. Okay, can somebody in the YouTube chat just send a test message? There you go. That said that it could be deleted. Hey Matt, how's it going? Hey Matt Damon. Yeah. Yeah, somebody on the YouTube end just say like hi or something in chat, or test or something that my moderator can just delete just to test their moderator powers. All right. There we go. Chewy's message. You could delete that. This is exciting for me. I've wanted to stream to this YouTube channel for a while, but there we go. And hi, David. You don't need to delete that one, obviously, but there we go. That's wonderful. And eventually I'm going to want to have more than one moderator. I mean, we have plenty of moderators on the Twitch end. But we're going to want to have more moderators eventually on the YouTube end. So if this goes well, I might be reaching out to some people or whatnot. I am absolutely going to be reading Tolkien tonight. We're going to be continuing along with The Fellowship of the Ring. Book 2. We're starting with the Council of Elrond. So that's exciting because it's a very, very exciting chapter. I should move myself down in the scene. I haven't adjusted it for the whole new setup here. There we go. Yeah. So yes, it's going to be The Fellowship of the Ring, starting with chapter 2 of book 2 in a few minutes. In a few minutes. I'm still in the process of letting people filter on in and everything, and figuring out how this all works. I mean, I'm a professional broadcaster. I stream every single day on Twitch. And if you're interested in Twitch, where I mainly play video games, and I'm a little bit more exuberant and modern in my manner of speaking, and we have a lot of fun, it is twitch.tv/necrovmx. There's a link to it actually in every video that I put up on YouTube. And we also have a Discord channel. And it's not specifically a Discord channel. It's more related to the Twitch channel, but we do talk about Tolkien on there sometimes because I can't help myself. So we're going to have if anybody's interested, I'm sure Alice can get you a link. Did you hear about the SS United States? No, I hadn't heard anything about it. What happened? I've been in this mode today of working, and I haven't looked at the news or any kind of thing, you know. Oh, they're moving it. Oh. Wow. That's something else. That's been in Philadelphia for a long time. I didn't see it when I was in Philadelphia. Let's see, I've been to Philly a few times, and yeah. Hello there, Manuela and Sarah Clark. How's it going? How's it going, everybody? You were checking out my Twitch earlier today. Yeah, it's a completely yeah. That's what I say. I'm completely different on Twitch. That's definitely more casual and relaxed and everything. I stream every day, Sarah. So, like tomorrow afternoon, for example, I'm going to be playing Dragon Quest III on Twitch. They're turning it into an artificial reef. Wow, that's interesting. I think that's probably a good thing, though, right? You love the background. That's Bilbo's house, right? Where all the adventures start. Well, the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, at least. Not all the adventures. The Silmarillion didn't begin in Bag End, obviously, but the adventures that I read when I was very young. But anyway, guys, yeah. To catch you guys up on everything, YouTube related. So, this is going to be the thing. Now, from now on, now that we know this works and everything, this is how all the Tolkien streams are going to be. They're going to be on both YouTube and Twitch. So I might be reaching out to certain people, or certain people, if you feel like it, if you feel you're up to it, can reach out to me to be additional moderators just specifically for YouTube. I don't need moderators on Twitch. I have plenty of moderators on Twitch. Many of which are there every single stream, such as Alice and Moogle. But for YouTube, it's a bit different. It would just be, every once in a while. I did ask Phil, and he wasn't feeling up to it when I asked him, but he might be feeling up to it at a different point in time, But yes, we do have a Discord, and like I said, it is a Discord that is really just, just me and my friends hanging out and related to the Twitch channel and everything. But we do talk about Tolkien because it's run by a Tolkien scholar. So, but we talk about a lot of things on there. So, But let me check subscriber count because that's like the big thing. I also I enabled something on YouTube called Super Chats, which is a way that you could just send a tip. So if you want to do that, that is enabled. But just going back to my YouTube dashboard, it really tickled me when I looked at it a few weeks ago. Well, it was a week and a half ago, and it said 2112 for subscribers, and I was just like, I got to take a screenshot and show my friends because we're all like big Rush fans, We're at 2139. Okay, that's pretty cool. And we're live on YouTube for the first time. Well, technically the second time because we did do a test stream. That was just a few minutes of me and Alice talking and just, testing things out. And apparently there was one person that was watching that and said that they took perverse pleasure from it, which I thought was very funny. Avowed. No, I've not played Avowed. Let me look into that. What is Avowed? Oh. It's an action RPG. Well, that looks cool. That just came out, huh? That looks cool. I do like action RPGs. We've been playing on Wednesdays. I've been playing East 10 Nordics. By the way, Alice, I don't know if you noticed this, but not yesterday, but Tuesday when I was playing East 10, and I didn't notice this until I raided at the end of the stream. And I don't know how raids work when I'm multi-streaming, so that'll be a whole thing. But I was in the Proud Nordics category that whole time because it came up on the person's shout-out thing when it said, NecroVMX was last seen playing East 10 Proud Nordics. And I'm like, Proud Nordics isn't even out yet. So I would like to occasionally do some streams of some Tolkien-related video games. And I have in the past, even before I started the YouTube channel, we did the horrible Super Nintendo game. And we did The Hobbit, which was a pretty good game. But I'd like to play some of the more modern ones. Like, say, I have some of those like Lego games, and I have the Shadow of Mordor, which I've never played, but it's sitting there in my library, and we can play stuff like that. Or the games based on the films were pretty good. I remember on PlayStation 2, the Two Towers and the Return of the King. There actually was a Fellowship game, but it was not based on the movies. It was a different sort of thing. Hey WT, how's it going? Hey WT, check it out. I'm on multi-streaming and it's actually working this time. You adore the movie streams. You adore the reading streams. You told me that the other day that you really love the reading streams, and I'm really glad to hear that because I really enjoy doing them. I love doing reading streams. Oh no, yeah, that cat. How does a game like that that is so weird. I'm not even going to say it on stream because I would say it any other day, but if I wasn't live on YouTube, I would say it. It was terrible. I was like, why does that exist? That seems like it would be on like the banned games list on Twitch, and Twitch is very, very permissive. There's a very short list of games that are banned, and if you ever look it up and you read it, you can tell why just from reading the titles. They're pretty terrible. I was like, why does that? Who even makes things like that? Who buys things like that? That's crazy. Anyway, guys, let's get into it. Let's start. So we're going to come over here. I did gussy up this stream a little bit to actually have a background now that I have the whole green screen set up. And I'm going to take the headphones off because they do mess with the thing. I just needed to be able to hear the music and stuff. But we're going to be killing the music. So we're going to be doing this without headphones, which is strange for me because the sound of my voice is different now. To me. Not to you, but to me. Oh, it seems to be clipping out a little bit of my head here. That's fine. Can show it tomorrow, yeah. I think what I do want to do is make myself a little bit smaller on this scene. I don't need to be quite so large. There we go. That's better, right? Okay, so we're getting into the Fellowship of the Ring, which my copy looks similar to the one on the right side of the screen, except mine is yellow with red text. It's not white with black text. And also the Elvish, the Tengwar script around the Eye of Sauron here is not red. I mean, there's a few differences, but it's basically the same thing. This is my actual childhood copy there. Hey, Evangelos, how's it going? It's going to be your bedtime story tonight. Wonderful. The Council of Elrond is where we're going to start. Now, last stream, we only got through 2 chapters. We did Flight to the Ford, and we did many meetings. And that's partly due to the fact that Flight to the Ford is a pretty long chapter, and I did have to stop to analyze a lot. Now, I do want anybody to know, if you've never seen these streams or watched the videos that I put on YouTube from the previous streams, these are not just reading streams. I'm not merely going to read the book, because that would be a copyright violation. You're actually not allowed to read copyrighted books unless you are doing educational content. So we will be stopping fairly often to talk about the text and to analyze it and to give you guys more background and more lore and to, basically, think of it more like a lecture than anything. So to catch you guys up, Frodo has reached Rivendell, and he reached Rivendell in a rather exciting manner. He ran, first he got stabbed by the Witch King. That didn't feel so great for him. And then he was basically poisoned. It wasn't like a real poison, but he was spiritually poisoned. These daggers that the Nazgul carry are called Morgul blades. Morgul is a word that means essentially black magic, necromancy. And, thank you so much for the $4.99. Thank you, Chewy. I feel like I should move the alert box so that it's more legible. Let's put that over here so that people can see it better. And I'm going to replay the alert there. Thank you very much for the super chat. Been tuning in for a few weeks now, loving it. Onward. Well, loving that you're here and that you tip me. That is wonderful. So these blades, they're designed to break. They're very brittle, and a piece of the tip of the blade wound up in Frodo's shoulder. And it is slowly making its way towards his heart, and he's getting sicker. And it's not like in the films where he just sort of immediately becomes almost like this zombified sort of thing. And yes, for these streams, we keep all the language in the chat PG, please. because everything has to be able to actually go on YouTube, and I do run a family-friendly channel. If you come by Twitch when I'm playing video games, you curse up a storm, but when I'm on YouTube, I prefer everybody to just keep it PG. Anyway, in the film, Frodo sort of became very, very ill almost immediately, and basically was useless. He couldn't do anything. And he wound up being basically carried to Rivendell by Arwen, who was on a horse, and she just sort of had him under her arm like a football and carried him there. And then, of course, the Nazgul come, and then the flood comes and washes them away. It's a little different in the book. Arwen's not part of this. It's actually Glorfindel. Glorfindel was a great hero of the First Age. He was one of the heads of the houses of Gondolin, the House of the Golden Flower. His name, Glorfindel, basically translates to Goldilocks. It means golden-haired. Is somewhat unusual for a Noldor man to have, or a Noldor and anybody to have blonde hair. There are exceptions like Galadriel, but Galadriel has Vanya ancestry, and the Vanya were usually the blonde elves. So most of the Noldor had dark hair, sometimes red hair. Some of Feanor's sons had red hair, but blonde Noldor were rather rare. So he was named Glorfindel because of his blonde hair. He actually died in the First Age fighting a Balrog. He actually killed the Balrog, and as it fell into a chasm, very similar to what happens later to Gandalf, it grabbed him. It grabbed him by his hair, the thing that he was famous, and dragged him down. And then Thorongil, the Lord of the Thorongil is Aragorn. Thorondor, Lord of the Eagles, swept down into the ravine and carried his body out, and he got a beautiful grave with flowers and everything. But of course, elves don't really die. So he's in the Lord of the Rings. And what's interesting is that when Tolkien was writing this, he was sort of unsure where he was going with this, whether Glorfindel was going to be the same Glorfindel that was in his story, The Fall of Gondolin, or whether it was just going to be a different elf with the same name. And sometimes that happens, because there's another elf that's going to be introduced in the chapter that we're about to read named Galdor. It's actually not the same Galdor from the First Age. And there's another elf that we're going to be introduced to in this chapter named Legolas, and it's not the same Legolas from the First Age. A lot of people forget or don't even know there was a Legolas in Gondolin. Legolas just means green leaf, and that guy sailed to the west. He was a Noldor, whereas our Legolas from the Lord of the Rings is Sindar elf. And I need to calm down. I'm getting a little too excited here. And that Legolas sailed to the west, and he changed his name. He didn't really change it. He just started using the Quenya form, which is Lykalasa, which is the same meaning. It's just a Quenya translation, green leaf. So sometimes there are elves that have the same name as a different elf, and they're not the same person. Then, of course, there's Glorfindel, who he decided was literally the same guy. And because he wanted to use Glorfindel, who was killed by a Balrog, this is where Tolkien decided that elves were fully undying. That if they were killed, they would go to a place called Mandos. And they would stay there for a while, and they would eventually get a new body, and it would be exactly equal to their old body, and they would come back to life. Not that they were ever really dead, but they would be able to walk around and actually leave Mandos and be in the Undying Lands. Unless, of course, the Doomsman, the head guy who is in charge of Mandos, his name is Namo, but the elves usually just call him Mandos because they so associate him with the place. Unless he decides to hold them there for one reason or another, because it is not only a sort of pseudo-purgatory on Arda, it's also a prison. That's where they kept Melkor for a while anyway. So, Glorfindel doesn't do the same thing that Arwen did in the film, or that Legolas did in the 1970s animated film. He doesn't take Frodo with him and just bring him onwards. He travels with them for a while. And then when it becomes imminent danger of the Nazgul, he puts... Thank you for the subscribe. Bitter Zombie, thank you. He puts Frodo on his horse and tells him to go on ahead. And Frodo is not interested in that. He's like, I can't leave my friends behind. You'll be in danger. And Glorfindel says, the only danger we're in right now is because of you. If you leave, the danger leaves with you. So, of course, Frodo doesn't fully listen. He gets past the ford of Bruinen, and instead of riding on into Elrond's home, he stops and he faces the Nazgul, and they taunt each other. And then the flood comes. And it's not something that Arwen did or that Glorfindel did. It was Elrond, with a little help from Gandalf, as we learned in the chapter Many Meetings, who flooded them. And that actually did not wash away all of the Nazgul, as is popularly portrayed, but 3 of them. The other 6 were driven into the flood by Glorfindel and Aragorn and Merry and Pippin and Sam, and they were waving, like flaming sticks and such, because the Nazgul are afraid of fire. Frodo has woken up. They've basically done surgery on him. They removed the piece of the blade. I personally would say that it was absolutely Elrond himself who extracted it. The ring is now on a chain around his neck. It's no longer attached to his pocket. He's met Bilbo. And he's recuperating, and we're getting into the Council of Elrond. So that catches us up. Let's move into this. Chapter 2, The Council of Elrond. Next day, Frodo woke early, feeling refreshed and well. He walked along the terraces above the loud flowing Bruinen and watched the pale, cool sun rise far above the mountains and shine down, slanting through the thin silver mist. The dew upon the yellow leaves was glimmering, and the woven nets of gossamer twinkled on every bush. Sam walked beside him, saying nothing, but sniffing the air and looking every now and again with wonder in his eyes at the great heights in the east. The snow was white upon their peaks. On a seat cut in the stone beside a turn in the path, they came upon Gandalf and Bilbo deep in talk. "Hello, good morning," said Bilbo. "Feel ready for the great council?" "I feel ready for anything," said Frodo. "But most of all, I should really like to go walking today and explore the valley. I should like to get into those pine woods up there." He pointed away, up the side of Rivendell to the north. "You may have a chance later," said Gandalf, "but we cannot make any plans yet. There is much to hear and decide today." Suddenly, as they were talking, a single clear bell rang out. "That is the warning bell for the Council of Elrond," cried Gandalf. "Come along now. Both you and Bilbo are wanted." Now, I'm going to pause here, not to analyze anything, but to let you guys know. I mentioned this earlier, that this is my childhood copy of the Fellowship of the Rings that my parents got for me when I was a young child. Hello there, Moogle. How are you doing? And this printing was in... Let's see. I believe it says it somewhere. I believe it's 1978. And there's a reason I bring this up, because there's actually a typo here. I'm going to see if I can show this to you guys. And let's see. I don't know if anybody else has a copy with this typo. And I'm very curious if you have the Fellowship of the Ring. It is page 252. Let me go to here. Oh, not here. Here, because this is where it's the largest. And if we look there, right where my finger is, I don't know if it's picking it up, but Gandalf is spelled incorrectly in that one section there. It's very interesting. It says Gandalf with an O, which is only 2 lines below where it's Gandalf with an A. So it's interesting that there is indeed a typo in my copy of the Fellowship of the Ring, which is not some crazy bootleg or anything. It's not a first printing. It does say revised edition down at the bottom here. It has all the appendices and everything. But I just wanted to point that out. And I'm curious if anybody else out there has a copy of the Fellowship of the Ring that has this typo on page 252 where Gandalf's name is spelled wrong. Frodo and Bilbo followed the wizard quickly along the winding path back to the house. Behind them, uninvited and for the moment forgotten, trotted Sam. Gandalf led them to the porch where Frodo found his friends the evening before. The light of the clear autumn morning was now glowing in the valley. The noise of bubbling waters came up from the foaming riverbed. Birds were singing, and a wholesome peace lay on the land. To Frodo, his dangerous flight and the rumors of darkness growing in the world outside already seemed only the memories of a troubled dream, but the faces were turned to meet them as they entered were grave. Elrond was there, and several others were seated in silence about him. Frodo saw Glorfindel and Gloin, and in a corner alone Strider was sitting, clad in his old travel-worn clothes again. Elrond drew Frodo to a seat by his side and presented him to the company, saying, "Here, my friends, is the hobbit, Frodo, son of Drogo. Few have ever come hither through greater peril or on an errand more urgent." He then pointed out and named those who Frodo had not met before. There was a younger dwarf at Gloin's side, his son Gimli. Beside Glorfindel there were several other councillors of Elrond's household, of whom Erestor was the chief, and with him was Galdor, an elf from the Grey Havens who had come on an errand from Círdan the shipwright. There was also a strange elf clad in green and brown, Legolas, a messenger from his father Thranduil, the king of the elves of northern Mirkwood. And seated a little apart was a tall man with a fair and noble face, dark-haired and grey-eyed, proud and stern of glance. He was cloaked and booted, as if for a journey on horseback, and indeed, though his garments were rich and his cloak was lined with fur, they were stained with long travel. He had a collar of silver, in which a single white stone was set. His locks were shorn about his shoulders. On a baldric he wore a great horn, tipped with silver, that now was laid upon his knees. He gazed at Frodo and Bilbo with sudden wonder. "Here," said Elrond, turning to Gandalf, "is Boromir, a man from the south. He arrived in the grey morning and seeks for counsel. I have bidden him to be present, for here his questions will be answered." Now, to pause here, I find it very interesting that Tolkien spends so long describing Boromir. He spends a full paragraph describing him, whereas Gimli, we don't get much of a description of him. We're just told that he's younger and that he's Gloin's son. We're given a very brief accounting of what Legolas is wearing. We don't really know what he looks like. And I'm going to say that the debate of dark-haired Legolas versus blonde Legolas, we don't actually know what color his hair is, but I would say that he's likely blonde because his father was blonde. Of course, that doesn't really mean that it's 100% that Legolas has blonde hair. Many artists have chosen to represent him with dark hair, especially before the Ralph Bakshi film came out and really popularized blonde Legolas in the 70s, and then, of course, once Orlando Bloom played him, nobody can imagine anything else in their head other than blonde hair, which is interesting because, Orlando Bloom has dark hair. But anyway, you could tell that Boromir specifically is going to be very important. He's going to be very important to the narrative of this particular book, of Book 2 of The Lord of the Rings, because it's the only, out of the 6 books, it's the only one that he's actually in. So, not that he's like the main character, Frodo's the main character, Aragorn arguably is a secondary main character, Sam is a secondary main character, but Boromir is important. And we're getting a really good look at what does he look like. What color is his hair? How is his hair cut? What is he wearing? His horn, his shield, all this stuff is all mentioned. It's all very important. The other thing that I already talked about Galdor, so I don't really have to mention him. He's not the same Galdor from Gondolin. Legolas is not the same Legolas from Gondolin. Glorfindel is the same Glorfindel from Gondolin. But yeah, let's continue here. Oh, actually, no. This is the other thing I wanted to talk about. So on Quora and YouTube, one of the questions that comes up time and time again is, why wasn't this person asked to come to the council, or why wasn't that person asked to come to the council? And it's anybody from Theoden or Treebeard or Tom Bombadil or Saruman, or the most recent one was about Galadriel and Celeborn. And you'll notice that this was like Frodo arrived, and then they had, he recovers, and then as soon as he's well, they have the council the next day. And Boromir isn't here because he was invited to the council by Elrond. He's here because he was invited to the council by the Valar, if anything. He was invited to the council because he had a dream. Well, his brother had a dream first, and his brother had the dream again. And then the third time they both had the dream. And the dream, we're gonna get into that in a little bit here, is what brought him here. And Elrond says, why don't you sit in on this council that we're having, because the questions that you have are going to be answered there. And we're going to find out why Gloin and Gimli are there, and we're going to find out why Legolas is here. But they weren't summoned. Invitations weren't set up. There was one point a little bit later where Elrond wonders if he should have invited Bombadil. And, of course, he's told, well, you could have done that, but he wouldn't have showed up anyway. He would have just ignored your summons. But the basic thing is that, this wasn't a meeting of all these people because they were all called here. Boromir was arguably called here by fate. And we might argue that everybody was called there by fate, by Ilúvatar, by the Valar. But this wasn't something that Elrond planned in advance. So that's why you don't have representatives from Rohan or from Lothlorien or from Dale or whatever. Not all that was spoken and debated in the council need now be told. Much was said of events in the world outside, especially in the south, and in the wide lands east of the mountains. Of these things Frodo had already heard many rumors, but the tale of Gloin was new to him, and when the dwarf spoke he listened attentively. It appeared that amid the splendor of their works of hand, the hearts of the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain were troubled. "It is now many years ago," said Gloin. "Not a shadow of disquiet fell upon our people. Whence it came we did not at first perceive. Words began to be whispered in secret. It was said that we were hemmed in a narrow place, and that great wealth and splendor would be found in a wider world. Some spoke of Moria, the mighty works of our fathers that are called in our own tongue Khazad-dûm, as they declare that now at last we have the power and numbers to return." Gloin sighed. "Moria, Moria, wonder of the northern world. Too deep we delved there and woke the nameless fear. Long have its vast mansions laid empty since the children of Durin fled, but now we spoke of it again with longing, and yet with dread. For no dwarf had dared to pass the doors of Khazad-dûm for many lives of kings, save Thror only, and he perished. At last, however, Balin listened to the whispers and resolved to go. And though Dain did not give leave willingly, he took with him Ori and Oin and many of our folk, and they went away south. That was nigh on 30 years ago. For a while we had news, and it seemed good. Messages reported that Moria had been entered, and a great work begun there. Then there was silence, and no word had ever come from Moria since. Then about a year ago a messenger came to Dain, but not from Moria, from Mordor, a horseman in the night, who called Dain to his gate. The Lord Sauron the Great, so he said, wished for our friendship. Rings he would give for it, such as he gave of old. And he asked urgently concerning hobbits, of what kind they were and where they dwelt. For Sauron knows, said he, that one of those was known to you on a time. At this we were greatly troubled, and we gave no answer. And then his voice was lowered, and he would have sweetened it if he could. As a token, only of your friendship Sauron asks this, he said, that you should find this thief, such was his word, and get from him, willing or no, a little ring, the least of rings, that once he stole. It is but a trifle that Sauron fancies, and an earnest of your good will. Find it, and 3 rings that the dwarf sires possessed of old shall be returned to you, and the realm of Moria shall be yours forever. Find only news of this thief, whether he still lives and where, and you shall have great reward and lasting friendship from the Lord. Refuse, and things will not seem so well. Do you refuse?" At that his breath came like the hiss of snakes, and all who stood by shuddered, but Dain said, "I say neither yea nor yea. I must consider this message, and what it means under its fair cloak. Consider well, but not too long, said he. "The time of my thought is my own to spend," answered Dain. "For the present," said he, and rode into the darkness. Heavy have the hearts of our chieftains been since that night. We needed not the fell voice of the messenger to warn us that his words had both menace and deceit, for we knew already that the power had re-entered Mordor, had not changed, and ever it betrayed us of old. Twice the messenger has returned, and has gone unanswered. The third and last time, so he says, is soon to come, before the ending of the year. And so I have been sent at last by Dain to warn Bilbo that he is sought by the enemy, and to learn, if may be, why he desires this ring, the least of rings. Also we crave the advice of Elrond. For the shadow grows and draws near. We discover that messengers have come to King Brand in Dale, and that he is afraid. We fear that he may yield. Already war is gathering on his eastern borders. If we make no answer, the enemy may move men of his rule to assail King Brand and Dane also. You have done well to come, said Elrond. You will hear today all that you need in order to understand the purposes of the enemy. There is naught that you can do other than to resist, with hope or without it. But you do not stand alone. You will learn that your trouble is but part of the trouble of all the Western world, the ring. What shall we do with this ring, the least of rings, the trifle that Sauron fancies? That is the doom that we must deem. That is the purpose for which you are called hither. Called, I say, though I have not called you to me, strangers from distant lands. You have come, and you are met in this very nick of time, by chance as it may seem. Yet it is not so. Believe rather that it is so ordered that we, who sit here, and none others, must now found counsel for the peril of the world. Now, therefore, things shall be openly spoken, that we have hidden from all but a few until this day. And first, so that all may understand what is the peril, the tale of the ring shall be told from the beginning even to this present. And I will begin that tale, though others shall end it. Okay, so let's pause here. Now, we've sort of gone through the first section, which is catching up with Dain and Gimli and Gloin and everybody, and finding out that a messenger from Sauron came to the Lonely Mountain. Now, there's really interesting thought here that the messenger referred to his lord as Sauron the Great. And Sauron doesn't like being called that generally. He doesn't usually let anybody say his name, because it's not really his name. Sauron is not his name. His name is Mairon. And Mairon is an elvish name that means admirable. It could also mean precious, in the sense that if you were to ask me, how do we say precious in Quenya, I would say it's Mairon, which is really interesting when Gollum is holding the ring. Oh, yes, precious, yes. You know, he's basically saying Sauron's name over and over again, just in, his own speech, not in Elvish. So that's just sort of interesting. But we learned that really Sauron's minions don't refer to him as Sauron. That's a little too familiar. The elves called him Sauron because it's an insult. Sauron basically translates as the hated one, the abhorred. It's not a nice word. It's similar to what they did to Melkor. Melkor means he who arises in might. Morgoth, which is the name that Feanor gave him, and the name that all of the elves, at least the ones that spoke Quenya, would call him, means dread tyrant. Now, these weren't the only names they gave them. In Sindarin, hi Zeldaman, in Sindarin, Morgoth was called Balglier. In Sindarin, Sauron was called Gorthaur. Wayne is there saying, Tevildo's House of Cats. Wayne there on the Twitch end. Tevildo was a name that Sauron had in the very, very early writings before he was even, a unified character. He was a cat at that point. From Beren and Luthien, he was the prince of all cats, whereas Huan was the lord of all dogs. And it was sort of this, fairy story that involved evil cats and nice dogs. And there is a band. I'm not going to say the name of the band because it's not appropriate for YouTube. But there was a black metal band that had an album. I can't even say the name of the album, but it was Tolkien related, and all of the song titles on it were very, very obscure Tolkien references, and one of them was Tevildo's House of Cats, and so that's just still pretty funny. But anyway, we only ever see one of Sauron's men that is allowed to use that name, and that is the mouth of Sauron. And so that sort of hints that the messenger that comes to Erebor might have been the mouth of Sauron. Oftentimes, the messenger that comes to Erebor is depicted as being either the Witch King or one of the Nazgul. I do think it was the mouth of Sauron, because around this same time, the Witch King was making inquiries of a similar type in the south. He was trying to get the same information from Saruman. And Saruman lied. He just, I don't know what? Hobbits, I think they live near the Anduin. So Saruman sent the Witch King off on sort of a wild goose chase, so to speak. They eventually got the truth out of Wormtongue, actually. And that little bit of information is actually not in The Lord of the Rings. It's in Unfinished Tales in a story called The Hunt for the Ring. And of course, at some point, we are going to read Unfinished Tales. But that's not today, obviously. We're still doing the Fellowship of the Ring. Another interesting thing to point out here is how the council started. I'm going to reread that sentence here. Not all that was spoken and debated in the council need now be told. This is really important because another common thread of question that comes up again and again and again, why didn't they talk about this at the council? Or why didn't they talk about that at the council? And the answer is they probably did. It was just that whatever it was, Frodo didn't feel like writing it down. That he didn't want the Council of Elrond to be pages upon pages upon pages. It's already a full chapter in his memoir, The Downfall of the Lord of the Rings and the Return of the King. It doesn't need to be, 3 chapters, 4 chapters, whatever it might have actually been. So you do have to kind of use your imagination a little bit here and say that, yes, they probably talked about a lot of things that weren't directly mentioned. All right, let's continue. Then all listened while Elrond in his clear voice spoke of Sauron and the Rings of Power, and their forging in the second age of the world long ago. A part of his tale was known to some there, but the full tale to none, and many eyes were turned to Elrond in fear and wonder, as he told of the elven smiths of Eregion, and their friendship with Moria, and their eagerness for knowledge by which Sauron ensnared them. For in that time he was not yet evil to behold, and they received his aid, and grew mighty in craft, whereas he learned all their secrets, and betrayed them, and forged secretly in the mountain of fire the one ring to be their master. But Celebrimbor was aware of him, and hid the 3 which he had made, and there was war, and the land was laid waste, and the gate of Moria was shut. Then, through all the years that followed, he traced the ring, but since that history is elsewhere recounted, even as Elrond himself set it down in his books of lore, it is not here recalled. For it is a long tale, full of deeds great and terrible, and briefly though Elrond spoke, the sun rode up into the sky, and the morning was passing ere he ceased. Of Númenor he spoke, its glory and its fall, and the return of the kings of men to Middle-earth out of the deeps of the sea, borne upon the wings of storm. Then Elendil the Tall and his mighty sons, Isildur and Anarion, became great lords. In the north realm they made an Arnor, and the south realm in Gondor, about the mouths of Anduin. But Sauron of Mordor assailed them, and they made the last alliance of elves and men, and the hosts of Gil-galad and Elendil were mustered in Arnor. Thereupon Elrond paused a while and sighed. I remember well the splendor of their banners, he said. It recalled to me the glory of the elder days and the hosts of Beleriand. So many great princes and captains were assembled. And yet not so many, nor so fair as when Thangorodrim was broken, and the elves deemed that evil was ended forever, and it was not so. You remember, said Frodo, speaking his thought aloud in his astonishment. But I thought, he stammered as Elrond turned toward him, I thought the fall of Gil-galad was a long age ago. So it was indeed, answered Elrond gravely. But my memory reaches back even to the elder days. Earendil was my sire, who was born in Gondolin before its fall, and my mother was Elwing, daughter of Dior, son of Luthien of Doriath. I have seen 3 ages in the west of the world, and many defeats, and many fruitless victories. I was the herald of Gil-galad, and marched with his host. I was at the battle of Dagorlad before the black gate of Mordor, where we had the mastery, for the spear of Gil-galad and the sword of Elendil, Aeglos and Narsil none could withstand. I beheld the last combat on the slopes of Orodruin, where Gil-galad died, and Elendil fell, and Narsil broke beneath him. But Sauron himself was overthrown, and Isildur cut the ring from his hand with the hilt shot of his father's sword, and took it for his own. At this the stranger Boromir broke in. So that is what has become of the ring, he cried. If ever such a tale was told in the south, it has long been forgotten. I have heard of the great ring, of him that we do not name. But we believe that it perished from the world in the ruin of his first realm. Isildur took it. That is tidings indeed. Alas, yes, said Elrond. Isildur took it, as should not have been. It should have been cast then into Orodruin's fire, nigh at hand where it was made, but few marked what Isildur did. He alone stood by his father in that last mortal contest, and by Gil-galad only Círdan stood an eye. But Isildur would not listen to our counsel. This I will have, as weirgild for my father and my brother, he said, and therefore, whether we would or no, he took it to treasure it. But soon he was betrayed by it to his death, and so it is named in the north Isildur's bane. Yet death maybe was better than what might have befallen him. Boromir, oh boy, indeed. Only to the north did these tidings come, and only to a few. Small wonder it is that you have not heard them, Boromir. From the ruin of the Gladden fields, where Isildur perished, 3 men only came ever back over the mountains after long wandering. One of these was Otar, the esquire of Isildur, who bore the shards of the sword of Elendil, and he brought them to Valandil, the heir of Isildur, who being but a child had remained here in Rivendell. But Narsil was broken, and its light extinguished, and it has not yet been forged again. Fruitless did I call the victory of the last alliance? Not wholly so, yet it did not achieve its end. Sauron was diminished, but not destroyed. His ring was lost, but not unmade. The Dark Tower was broken, but its foundations were not removed. For they were made with the power of the ring, and while it remains they will endure. Many elves and many mighty men, and many of their friends have perished in the war. Anarion was slain, and Isildur was slain, and Gil-galad and Elendil were no more. Never again shall there be any such league of elves and men, for men multiply and the firstborn decrease, and the 2 kindreds are estranged. And ever since that day, the race of Númenor has decayed, and the span of their years has lessened. In the north, after the war and the slaughter of the Gladden fields, the men of Westerness were diminished, and their city of Animinus beside Lake Evandene fell into ruin, and the heirs of Valandil removed and dwelt at Fornost, on the high north downs, and that now too is desolate. Men call it Deadman's Dyke, and they fear to tread there, for the folk of Arnor dwindled, and their foes devoured them, and their lordship passed, leaving only green mounds in the grassy hills. So he's going to talk about Gondor next, but I want to add a little bit more information here about Arnor, the northern realm of Elendil. He's glossing over what happened, as Elrond always does, as elves always do, because they live for so long that the histories of men can only be described in very broad strokes by them. Because if you think about someone like Elrond, who is thousands of years old, what is 80 years, 100 years, 200 years? Nothing to him. It's like a season, a summer, So Arnor was the realm in the north. Now, the way that it was set up was that Elendil was the high king, and that there were 2 lesser kings. There was Isildur and Anarion. And Isildur was the king in the north, and Anarion was the king in the south. And what happened is that, of course, when they went to Mordor, first Anarion was killed. Some sort of object, a rock or a piece of the tower, some sort of heavy object was thrown from Barad-dûr, and it struck Anarion in the head, and he died. And so his son became the next king of Gondor, keeping in mind that there is a high king above them. Thank you, WT. For you, the day bison graced your village was the most important day of your life, but for me it was a Tuesday. Elrond, probably. Yes, absolutely. Oh, that stupid movie. Oh, Raul Julia at his best, though. But yeah, it is sort of an apt comparison, because it's just like, oh, that was just another day. Elrond is not quite as mean about it, of course. He's a good guy. But anyway, so Isildur, once Elendil died, was to become the High King, and that his son would be the king of Arnor, and his nephew would be the king of Gondor. But before he could go up to the north, him and 3 of his sons were killed. His youngest son, the little boy, was the only one that survived. And he was raised by Elrond, and he eventually became the king of Arnor. But at this point, everything was so broken up, it wasn't one realm anymore. There wasn't a high king. There was just a king in the north and a king in the south. So Gondor and Arnor were designed to be one land, but they became severed from each other. They became two separate places. Now, Arnor, we'll talk about the fall of Arnor because Elrond really glossed over it. What happened? I mean, a lot of things happened. There was war, there was strife, there was disease, there was all sorts of things. There was depopulation. But the biggest thing, the thing that really killed them, was that eventually they had a king who died, who had 3 sons, and his eldest son, of course, was to be the next king of Arnor. But the 2 younger sons started arguing about it. Well, we want to be kings too. Why should you be king and not us? That doesn't seem right. And this could have led to a civil war, but what they decided to do was, instead of fighting about it, they just split the realm. So Arnor was no more, and now it was 3 separate realms, Arthedain, Rhudaur, and Cardalos. And they all fell in time. Cardalos was barely populated anyway. Rhudaur had a lot of issues. Eventually, the only one that still had a king was Arthedain. The last king of Arthedain was one of the one that set up the Shire, I believe. There was also Arvedui as well. Maybe he was the last king. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to check the appendix. But either way, eventually there was no more king there, and it just sort of became what it is now, just parts of Eriador there. So that's what really happened there. All right, let's move on here. In the south, the realm of Gondor long endured, and for a while its splendor grew, recalling somewhat of the might of Numenor ere its fall, high towers that people built, and strong places and havens of many ships. And the winged crown of the kings of men was held in awe by folk of many tongues. Their chief city was Osgiliath, citadel of the stars, though the midst of which the river flowed. And Minas Ithil they built, tower of the rising moon, eastward, upon a shoulder of the mountain of shadow, and westward at the feet of the white mountains Minas Anor they made, tower of the setting sun. There in the courts of the king grew a white tree, from the seed of that tree from which Isildur brought over the deep waters. And the seed of that tree before came from Eressëa, and before that out of the uttermost west, in the days before days when the world was young. But in the wearing of the swift years of Middle-earth, the line of Meneldir, son of Anarion, failed, and the tree withered, and the blood of the Númenóreans became mingled with that of lesser men. Then the watch upon the walls of Mordor slept, and dark things crept back to Gorgoroth. And on a time of evil things came forward, and they took Minas Ithil and abode in it, and they made it in a place of dread, and it is called Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery. Then Minas Anor was named anew Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard, and these 2 cities were ever at war, but Osgiliath, which lay between them, was deserted, and its ruins shadows walked. So it has been for many lives of men. But the lords of Minas Tirith still fight on, defying our enemies, and keeping the passage of the river from Argonath to the sea. And now that part of the tale that I tell is drawn to its close. For in the days of Isildur the ruling ring passed out of all knowledge, and the 3 were released from its dominion. But now in this latter day they are in peril once more, for to our sorrow the one has been found. Others shall speak of its finding, for in that I played small part. Just a brief note here, that he mentions the White Tree of Gondor, and that it was brought from Númenor, and then even before that it came from Eressëa. Eressëa is a little island off the coast of Aemon. It's part of the Undying Lands, and basically what happened is that all of the Undying Lands were once lit by these 2 trees. There was Laurelin the gold, and Telperion the silver. And they would sort of wax and wane, and this is how they told time. When Laurelin was all lit up, and everything was golden, it was daytime. And when Telperion lit up, and everything was silvery, it was nighttime. And those days were very, very long. They weren't like, 24-hour days and such. Oh, I can't answer you in Elvish right now. I'm in the middle of a reading, but thank you, Zelda, man. But anyway, the reason I point this out is because the elves really loved Telperion. I really loved it. And it's because of the way that they were born. Because they originally weren't born, but there were 144 elves that basically came up out of the earth. They were sleeping in the earth, and they awoken. And Middle-earth was dark. It was once lit by 2 great lamps, and these were destroyed by Melkor. And that left it dark. And then Varda, also known as Elbereth. Notice earlier on, Frodo said the stars... not Frodo, Bilbo said the stars of Elbereth. She created way more stars. There were stars already, but she created a whole bunch of them. And no, I know what it says. I couldn't answer you in Elvish, Zelda, and I'm doing very well. And this was to give the elves light that they can see in the darkness. Now, eventually there was a sun and a moon, but they didn't really like the sun all that much. Not because they're evil and evil hates the light or anything like that. Because that's the reason that, for example, Gollum hates the sun. It wasn't that the elves hated the sun, it's just they liked nighttime. They liked to be able to see the stars. Even the term elf is derived from, in universe, is derived from Eldar, which means of the stars, the star people. Elrond, Elendil, Elros, Elbereth, mother of the stars. All of these names with E-L refer to both the elves themselves, but also to the stars. So when the trees were destroyed, the elves in the Undying Lands, in places like, Valinor and Eldamar and Erisea, were like, man, we really, really miss the Silver One. We really miss the way that it glowed. And a tree was made, a silver tree, not of the same beauty and majesty as the original Telperion, but lesser so, that was planted in Erisea, and it was called Celeborn, which means silver tree. Same name as Galadriel's husband. Of course, he has a different name. He's Teleporno in Sindarin. In Quenya, it's Celeborn. But anyway, so that tree, they took a seedling from it, and they brought it to Numenor, and then they brought a seedling of that tree to Middle-earth to be in Gondor. So you could say that tree's, father, so to speak, was in Numenor. And then that tree's father was in the Undying Lands. And then that tree was based off of one of the original 2 trees of Valinor. So it's interesting how these sort of things just filter on down. All right, let's move on here. He ceased, but at once Boromir stood up, tall and proud before them. "Give me leave, Master Elrond," said he, "first to say more of Gondor, for verily from the land of Gondor I am come. And it would now be well for all to know what passes there. For few, I deem, know of our deeds, and therefore guess little of their peril, if we should fail at last. Believe not that in the land of Gondor the blood of Numenor is spent, nor all its pride and dignity forgotten. By our valor the wild folk of the east are still restrained, and the terror of Morgul kept at bay, and thus alone at peace and freedom maintained in the lands behind us, bulwark of the west. But if the passages of the river should be won, what then? Yet that hour maybe is not now far away. The nameless enemy has risen again. Smoke rises once more from a Roedran that we call Mount Doom. The power of the Black Land grows, and we are hard beset. When the enemy returned, our folk were driven from Ithilien, our fair domain east of the river, and we kept a foothold there and strength of arms. But this very year, in the days of June, sudden war came upon us out of Mordor, and we were swept away. We were outnumbered, for Mordor had allied itself with the Easterlings and the cruel Haradrim. But it was not by numbers that we were defeated. A power was there that we have not felt before. Some said that it could be seen, like a great black horseman, a dark shadow under the moon. Wherever he came, a madness filled our foes, but fear fell upon our boldest, so that horse and man gave way and fled. Only a remnant of our eastern force came back, destroying the last bridge that still stood amid the ruins of Osgiliath. I was in the company that held the bridge, until it was cast down behind us. 4 only were saved by swimming, my brother and myself and 2 others. But still we fight on, holding all the west shores of Anduin. and those who shelter behind us give us praise. If ever they hear our name, much praise, but little help. Only from Rohan now will any men ride to us when we call. In this evil hour I am come on an errand over many dangerous leagues to Elrond. 110 days I have journeyed all along. But I do not seek allies in war. The might of Elrond is in wisdom, not in weapons, it is said. I come to ask for counsel in the unraveling of hard words. For on the eve of the sudden assault a dream came to my brother in a troubled sleep, and afterward a like dream came oft to him again, and once to me. In that dream I thought the eastern sky grew dark, and there was a growing thunder. But in the west a pale light lingered, and out of it I heard a voice, remote but clear, crying, Seek for the sword that was broken, in Imladris it dwells. There shall be counsels taken, stronger than Morgul's spells. There shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand, for Isildur's bane shall waken, and the halfling forth shall stand. Of these words we could understand little, and we spoke to our father Denethor, lord of Minas Tirith, wise in the lore of Gondor. There only would he say that Imladris was of old the name among the elves of a far northern dale where Elrond and half-elven dwelt, greatest of lore-masters. Therefore my brother, and seek for Imladris was our need. Was eager to heed the dream, and seek for Imladris, but since the way was full of doubt and anger, I took the journey upon myself. Loth was my father to give me leave, and long have I wandered by roads forgotten, seeking the home of Elrond, of which many have heard, but few knew where it lay. Okay, so brief pause here. So it's interesting that the Boromir is showing a little bit of his personality here. He's not got a lot of manners. So Elrond is telling the history, and he says, well, here is where my part ends. And this is where he would kick it over to either Gandalf or to Bilbo. But Boromir says, hold on a second. I have something to say. And he says, don't let anybody tell you that we've diminished. We haven't. We're still awesome, but also we're in trouble. But we're not asking for help in war. We're only asking for wisdom. He's sort of like speaking against himself. He's saying a lot of things. Not all of it makes a lot of sense. He's blustering. The interesting thing, other than the dream, is he mentions a great black horseman, a dark shadow under the moon. That's the Witch King. Now, of course, a lot of people interpret the dream as coming from Iluvatar, from God. And that's not the case here. There is instances of direct divine intervention, the Deus Ex Machina, in the Lord of the Rings and the Legendarium as a whole. But in this sense, it's the Valar. And we know it's the Valar from this line. In that dream, I thought the eastern sky grew dark and there was a growing thunder, but in the west a pale light lingered, and out of it I heard a voice, remote but clear. Now, when he says eastern sky, that's not capitalized. When he says west, that's capitalized. And whenever Tolkien writes the word west, western, and it's capitalized, he's not talking about whatever happens to be to the west, which for me is that way. He doesn't happen to be talking about, he's not talking about Numenor, he's talking about the Undying Lands. He's talking about Valinor and the light out of Valinor and the voice. Now, I had a discussion with a few people recently, including my fellow Tolkien scholar, Laurel Callahan, and we talked about who was it speaking, which of the Valar was it, and, everybody has their own thought. My thought is that it's Urmo. Because Urmo is most associated with dreams. Laurel's thought, which is a good thought, by the way, I don't agree with it, but it is an excellent thought, is that it was actually Ulmo, because Ulmo is the one that would have the most to do with the race of mortal men, which I think is excellent logic. Personally, I do think that it's Urmo because it's a dream, and I think that Ulmo would have taken a more direct approach. He would have sent a messenger or even appeared himself in Middle-earth. He's not above doing that. He's done it before. But, either way, it could have just been a collective voice of the Valar as well. Let's continue along here. "And here in the house of Elrond more shall be made clear to you," said Aragorn, standing up. He cast his sword upon the table that stood before Elrond, and the blade was in 2 pieces. "Here is your sword that was broken," he said. "And who are you? And what have you to do with Minas Tirith?" asked Boromir, looking at wonder at the lean face of the ranger in his weather-stained cloak. "He is Aragorn, son of Arathorn," said Elrond, "and he is descended through many fathers from Isildur, Elendil's son of Minas Ithil. He is the chief of the Dunedain of the north, and few are now left of that folk." "Then it belongs to you and not to me at all," cried Frodo in amazement, springing to his feet as if he expected the ring to be demanded at once. "It does not belong to either of us," said Aragorn, "but it has been ordained that you should hold it for a while." "Bring out the ring, Frodo," said Gandalf solemnly. "The time has come. Hold it up, and then Boromir will understand the remainder of his riddle." There was a hush, and all turned their eyes on Frodo. He was shaken by a sudden shame and fear, and he felt a great reluctance to reveal the ring, and a loathing of its touch. He wished he was far away. The ring gleamed and flickered as he held it up before them in his trembling hand. "Behold, Isildur's bane," said Elrond. Boromir's eyes glinted as he gazed at the golden thing. "The halfling," he muttered. "And then the doom of Minas Tirith come at last? But why then should we seek a broken sword?" "The words were not the doom of Minas Tirith," said Aragorn, "but doom and great deeds are indeed at hand. For the sword that was broken is the sword of Elendil that broke beneath him when he fell. It has been treasured by his heirs when all other heirlooms were lost. For it was spoken of old among us that it should be made right again when the ring Isildur's bane was found. Now, you have seen the sword that you have sought, would you not? Do you wish for the house of Elendil to return to the land of Gondor?" "I was not sent to beg any boon, but only the meaning of a riddle," answered Boromir proudly. "Yet we are hard-pressed, and the sword of Elendil would be a help beyond our hope, if such a thing could indeed return out of the shadows of the past." He looked again at Aragorn, and doubt was in his eyes. Frodo felt Bilbo stir impatiently at his side. Evidently he was annoyed on his friend's behalf. Standing suddenly up, he burst out, "All that is gold does not glitter, and not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither, deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring, renewed shall be the blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king." Not very good, perhaps, but to the point, if you need more beyond the words of Elrond. If that was worthy of a journey of 110 days to bear, you had best listen to it. He sat down with a snort. "I made that up myself," he whispered to Frodo, "for the Dunedain. A long time ago when he first told me about himself. I almost wish that my adventures were not over, and that I could go with him when his day comes." Aragorn smiled at him, and then turned to Boromir again. "For my part, I forgive your doubt," he said. "Little do I resemble the figures of Elendil and Isildur as they stand carven in their majesty in the halls of Denethor. I am but the heir of Isildur, not Isildur himself. I have had a hard life, and a long, and the leagues that lie between here and Gondor are a small part of the count of my journeys. I have crossed many mountains and many rivers, and have trodden many plains, even then to the far countries of Rhûn and Harad, where the stars are strange. But my home, such as I have, is in the north. For here the heirs of Elendil have ever dwelt in long line unbroken from father unto son for many generations. Our days have darkened, and we have dwindled. But ever the sword has passed to a new keeper. And this I will say to you, Boromir, ere I end. Lonely men are we, rangers of the wild, hunters, but hunters ever of the servants of the enemy, for they are found in many places, not in Mordor only. If Gondor, Boromir, has been a stalwart tower, we have played another part. Many evil things there are that your strong walls and bright swords do not stay. You know little of the lands beyond your bounds. Peace and freedom, do you say? The north would have known them little but for us. Fear would have destroyed them, but when dark things come from the houseless hills or creep from sunless woods, they fly from us. What roads would they dare tread? What safety would there be in quiet lands or in the homes of simple men at night if the Dunedain were asleep, or were all gone to the grave? And yet less thanks have we than you. Travellers scowl at us, and countrymen give us scornful names. Strier I am to one fat man who lives within a day's march of foes that would freeze his heart, or lay his little town in ruin if he were not guarded ceaselessly. Yet we would not have it otherwise. If simple folk are free from care and fear, simple they will be, and we must be secret to keep them so. That has been the task of my kindred, while the years have lengthened and the grass has grown. But now the world is changing once again. A new hour comes. Isildur's bane is found. Battle is at hand. The sword shall be reforged. I will come to Minas Tirith. Isildur's bane is found, you say, said Boromir. I have seen a bright ring in the halfling's hand. But Isildur perished ere this age of the world began, they say. How do the wise know that this ring is his? And how is it passed down the years until it is brought hither by so strange a messenger? That shall be told, said Elrond. But not yet, I beg, master, said Bilbo. Already the sun is climbing to noon, and I feel the need of something to strengthen me. I have not named you, said Elrond, smiling. But I do so now. Come, tell us your tale. And if you have not yet cast your story into verse, you may tell it in plain words. The briefer, the sooner you shall be refreshed. Very well, said Bilbo. I will do as you bid, but I will now tell the true story. And if some here have heard me tell it otherwise, he looked sidelong at Gloin, I ask them to forget it and forgive me. I only wish to claim the treasure as my very own in those days, and to be rid of the name of thief that was put on me. But perhaps I understand things a little better now. Anyway, this is what happened. Now, he's going to tell this story, of course, but let me pause here. So Boromir, once again, he acts in a very ignorant manner. He speaks boldly. He doubts Aragorn, and Aragorn puts him in his place in a very gentle way, and he kind of tells him, hey, look, man, Gondor's not the whole world. You are not keeping Sauron at bay single-handedly. The whole rest of the world is doing their part. You just don't know about it. And we're going to see time and time again that Boromir he's a great guy and everything, but when it comes to anything that's not Gondor, he doesn't know anything. And he's going to speak in an ignorant fashion on things outside of his realm of expertise many times. And it's going to annoy Aragorn. It's going to annoy Gandalf. And it's going to annoy a few other characters in this scene. It particularly bothered Bilbo, who is very close to Aragorn. And he doesn't like this guy who kind of comes out of nowhere and starts blustering and pacing around. And especially since he interrupted the flow of events that Elrond was telling the story of the One Ring. And he says, all right, now we're going to pass it from me. And Bilbo would have been up next, or perhaps Gandalf. It looks like it was Bilbo. And Boromir interrupts and then says, but what about the tale of the ring? I haven't been told that. And it's like, dude, if you just sat there and waited your turn, you would have heard the tale of the ring. But he had to be very prideful and everything. And I don't mean to bag on Boromir, but literary Boromir is a very different character from movie Boromir. Movie Boromir was interesting because he was like kind of a nicer guy, you know. Literary Boromir is kind of a mess. We forgive him anyway because he did some great things, and he was a good-hearted person. He just was ignorant. I would say that's his main thing, is that he's ignorant. To some there, Bilbo's tale was wholly new, and they listened with amazement while the old hobbit, not at all displeased, recounted his adventures with Gollum at full length. He did not omit a single riddle. He would have given also an account of his party and disappearance from the Shire if he had been allowed, but Elrond raised his hand. Well told, my friend, he said, but that is enough at this time. For the moment it suffices to know that the ring is passed to Frodo, your heir. Let him now speak. Then, less willingly than Bilbo, Frodo told of all his dealings with the ring, from the day that it passed into his keeping. Every step of his journey from Hobbiton to the fort of Bruinen was questioned and considered, and everything that he could recall concerning the Black Riders was examined. At last he sat down again. Not bad, Bilbo said to him. You would have made a good story of it, if they hadn't kept on interrupting. I tried to make a few notes, but we shall have to go over it again together sometime if I'm to write it up. There are whole chapters of stuff before you even got here. Yes, it made quite a long tale, answered Frodo. But the story still does not seem complete to me. I still want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf. Hey there, Jemina. Sean Bean made you like Boromir. In the book, you never cared for him. I feel that's really accurate. I remember going to see the Fellowship of the Ring film with my family when it first came out, and it was at this theater doesn't exist anymore, but it was the kind of theater that they had a drive-in, and they also had the indoor theater, and we went to the indoor theater, and I just remembered Boromir. I was just prepared, like, oh man, the heck with this guy, you know what I mean? But, you wind up liking him. I think the one moment that I was like, there he is, was a moment that's not even in the book, where Frodo slipped and fell at Cadothras, and the ring went flying, and Boromir picked it up. And I was just like, who picked up the ring? And you see it's Boromir, and I'm like, of course he picked it up, right? He didn't touch it directly. He only held the chain. And there's that great scene where Aragorn rests his hand on his sword and says, give Frodo back the ring. Boromir makes a little speech. I think that both literary Boromir and film Boromir, who are very different characters, acquitted themselves in the end. But the thing that Sean Bean did, and there's two things that Sean Bean did in the films that came through in the performance. One is that, I don't know if you know this, but Sean Bean is afraid of flying. He won't go in a helicopter. So when they're doing these scenes on mountains, all these characters that were playing the Fellowship of the Ring would get in the helicopter, and he would have to walk. He wouldn't have to, but that's the way he preferred it. So he would have to leave earlier, and he would be tired and in kind of a bad mood, from all that hiking. And then that really came through in his performance. The other thing that he did was the line right before the character dies where he acknowledges that Aragorn is the king. That's not in the book. Boromir died much faster in the book. He didn't have time to say all the things that he wanted to say, but that was actually Sean Bean's idea. That wasn't in the script, or was added to the script, I would say. That was his idea. So that was something really important that he brought to the character. Okay, I feel like I'm not getting all the chats here. Let me see something here. Because I'm seeing things pop up on the screen from YouTube, and I'm not seeing them in my multi-stream chat. So I'm sorry if there's anybody on the YouTube end of it that has been talking and I haven't been answering. Let me bring it up in a separate window, because right now I'm noticing that there's things popping up here that are not there. So let me go to my my YouTube here. So I thought the YouTube side was kind of quiet, and that's interesting because we have a lot of views on YouTube right now. So I'm going to join the stream there and see if I can access the chat from there and just have it like this. Okay, wow, I missed so much. Okay, I don't know why, but for some reason the YouTube chat is not working on my end. So let me, you know what broke it? The tip. We got a tip, and anything since then I haven't seen. So let me welcome in a few people here. Sifrequeth, I hope I'm not saying that wrong. One does not simply document the entire Council of Elrond, exactly. Yes, and Frankish Empire split in three. Very true. See, potatoes. Hello there, apostate plus tax. Indeed. Hello there, Aish. You thought Eldar meant speakers. Okay, I can answer that. Quendi means speakers. That was the name that they had for themselves. They called themselves the Quendi. And that's from that you get Quendian, Quenya, and things like that. Eldar was what Orome first called them. It means people under the stars because that's where he found them. Okay. The guy rolls up and drops Andril on the table. He really did do that. Aragorn's sort of... Oh, you figured out it was Quendi. I'm sorry that I missed so much chat there. What foes are a day's march from Bree? There is a good one. Okay, so Monkismo, and thank you for being a member, by the way. In the north, there are the remnants of Audenor. There's the Barrow Downs. I mean, think about, like they got out of the Barrow Downs and then they went right to Bree. The Barrow Downs are there. Fornost was just to the north of Bree, and that's ruined, and there's all sorts of nasty things there. Also, the Etten Moors. Now, it takes the Fellowship quite a while to get to the Etten Moors, but that's because they went in such a strange way up to the north and kind of weaving around. If they would have taken the road, the Etten Moors are right there. And Etten Moor is Etten is the same etymology as Ent, and it basically is giant. So there are giants there as well. Yeah, I am so sorry that I missed so much chat on the YouTube side. For some reason, it wasn't coming into my multi-chat there. And hello there, Kurt Manowing. You cannot stay for the whole council, but excited to watch a coverage of your favorite chapter. Oh, okay, excellent. On replay. Yeah, it will be on replay, of course, and since you're a member, you're going to get to see that really early and everything. I don't know why the multi-chat... Let me type something in. Like, I'm just going to type a test and see what happens here, if it comes to me. Because for some reason... But I have the YouTube chat. It's not coming to me. I have the YouTube chat. I'm just going to switch it to just Twitch here and have Twitch and YouTube in two separate things. But thank you for everybody that's been talking for the past half hour that I haven't been able... I'm sorry that I didn't answer you guys. I wasn't seeing it. And I thought that's strange that we have high views right now and not really anybody talking except from Twitch. Twitch was talking. YouTube was not. From now on, I'm going to have the two chats separately instead of that intermingled thing, because that intermingled thing does not work. All right, let's continue onwards here. Galdor of the Havens, who sat nearby, overheard him. "You speak for me also," he cried, and turning to Elrond, he said, "The wise may have good reason to believe that the halfling's trove is indeed the great ring of long debate, unlikely though that may seem to those who know less. But may we not hear the proofs? And I would ask this also, what of Saruman? He is learned in the lore of the rings, yet he is not among us. What is his counsel, if he knows the things that we have heard?" "The questions that you ask, Galdor, are bound together," said Elrond. "I had not overlooked them, and they shall be answered. But these things, it is the part..." Oh, wow, okay. Oh. Sorry about that. You're painting Lord of the Rings minis. That's interesting. You should post a picture of them. I'd like to see those. When you're done with them, of course. "The questions that you ask, Galdor, are bound together," said Elrond. "I had not overlooked them, and they shall be answered. But these things it is the part of Gandalf to make clear, and I call upon him last, for it is his place of honour. In all this matter he has been the chief." "Some, Galdor," said Gandalf, "would think the tidings of Gloin and the pursuit of Frodo proof enough that the halfling's trove is a thing of great wealth to the enemy. Yet it is a ring. What then? The 9 the Nazgul keep. The 7 are taken or destroyed." At this Gloin stirred, but did not speak. "The 3 we know of. What then is this one that he desires so much?" Quick pause. Danke. This is big. I've been talking about this a lot recently a little bit on YouTube and a lot on Quora. Gandalf says something highly controversial here. And I'm going to want, in that paragraph that I just read, does anybody in the chat, whether it's YouTube or Twitch or whatever, can anybody tell me what Gandalf said that is highly controversial, that is being debated by Tolkien scholars right now? Let's see if anybody knows. I have to hydrate really badly right now. So, I have another water right here. I want to see if anybody knows. What was the big controversy? What did he say that's so unusual? Zelda Man on the Twitch site is thinking. "Fly, you fools." No, I didn't read that part. That's in a much, much, much later part. The elves dwarves' acrimony with Gloin. No, Gloin was stirring because they mentioned the dwarven rings and how they were destroyed. It wasn't that. It was something that Gandalf said. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read that paragraph again. And I want you guys to think, what did Gandalf say here that could be considered controversial in the realm of Tolkien scholarship? "Some Galdor," said Gandalf, "would think the tidings of Gloin and the pursuit of Frodo proof enough that the halfling's trove is a thing of great worth to the enemy. Yet it is a ring. What then? The 9 the Nazgul keep. The 7 are taken or destroyed." At this Gloin stirred, but did not speak. "The 3 we know of. What, then, is this one that he desires the most?" You don't know any Tolkien scholars? You know me. And if you follow the channel, you know Matt Richardson, and you know Sid Kemp as well. So let's see. That's the second channel. I'm going to tell you guys, so if you don't get it, it's fine. But he said something then. The 9 having their rings. Yes, Zach. Yes, this is a big thing right now. I have been pointing this out to people, and nobody really wants to listen to it. But Gandalf here said that the 9 hold their rings. That's interesting, isn't it? Earlier in the story, in the chapter The Shadow of the Past, he said that Sauron held the 9 rings. Right? Now, it's 17 years later, right? Things have changed. It's actually closer to 18 years later. He's either changed his mind or he's correcting himself. But later in the story, Galadriel says that Sauron holds the 7 and the 9. Is she right or is Gandalf right? Who has the knowledge here? We clearly have. I said this in a recent article. I said that Tolkien was not clear about this. Gandalf could be wrong. He could be right. He said 2 different things at 2 different points in time. Galadriel could be wrong, or Galadriel could be right. It could be both. It could have been that at the time that Gandalf was speaking, in the shadow of the past, that what he said was correct, and that things have changed. No one knows for sure. We can't know either way. I think that Gandalf is saying the truth here, and that it is Galadriel who is mistaken. And the reason I think this is because Galadriel also says that he holds the 7. He does not hold the 7. He holds 3 of the 7. The other 4 are gone forever. They were destroyed by dragons. Maybe she knew that. Maybe she was being poetic. But it comes off to me like an error. Galadriel is, of course, not perfect. And that little bit of what could be construed as an error makes me sort of think that Gandalf here is correct. The way that I see it is that at some point he took the rings back from them, but that when they went out to seek the one, he gave them the rings back. And that's why Gandalf said what he said previously. The literary reason is what you just heard. The practical reason is a lot more boring, but it's very quick. The Shadow of the Past is the oldest chapter. It's the first thing that Tolkien wrote for The Lord of the Rings. He basically came off of The Hobbit and immediately started to work on the sequel. And before he wrote The Long Expected Party, he wrote The Shadow of the Past. He wrote the conversation between Gandalf and Frodo, where it was discovered that the ring that Bilbo found was the One Ring. Obviously, things got revised. But in one of his letters, Tolkien even pointed out that this is the oldest bit of the entire book. In his letters, Tolkien points out that The Lord of the Rings was rushed, which is amazing. It took him 20 years to write, and he said it was rushed. The Silmarillion was his whole life, his whole adult life, and he still didn't finish it, so that tells you what his idea of rushed is. If he was an elf, things would be different, right? Thinking of Sauron wearing the 9 rings, he only has 9 fingers. That is funny. But I think that Gandalf misspoke earlier, and I think that was just an older version. I think that if Tolkien was given more time, he would have revised The Shadow of the Past to be more like that. And yes, I was going to bring up Zach. You're very on cue here. I was going to bring up Unfinished Tales because there's two different versions of it. Now you're almost right. In one, they mention the Nazgul having surrendered the rings to Sauron, and the other, it doesn't mention it like at all. And the one where the rings were surrendered to Sauron was the alternate tale, the version B. You know. Galadriel, not perfect. I shall have to teach you gentle speech. And you have a little axe. That's amazing. That's actually one of my favorite lines. And I love the follow up later when he's talking to Éomer, and Éomer calls over Gimli, and he says something along the lines of, "Do you have your axe with you?" And he says, "No," because they were at a feast. "I could get it if I need it. Why?" And he says, "Because I've seen Galadriel, and I cannot say that she is the most beautiful woman in Middle Earth." And Gimli says, I shall get my axe. But of course, then it's explained that the only reason that he can't say that Galadriel is the most beautiful woman is because he finds Arwen to be more beautiful. Okay, no one is perfect. That is correct. That is what Gandalf would say in this sense. Even Galadriel would say that she's not perfect. All right, let's move on here. I wanted to talk about that whole ring controversy because it's something that I've been talking about recently, and people are like, "Well, no, but Galadriel said," and I'm like, "Yeah, Galadriel said, but not everything that she says is right." And Gandalf said both ways, so who really knows? It's one of those mysteries. "There is indeed a wide waste of time between the river and the mountain, between the loss and finding, but the gap in the knowledge of the wise has been filled at last, yet too slowly. For the enemy has been close behind, closer even than I feared, and well it is that not until this year, this very summer as it seems, did he learn the full truth. Some here will remember that many years ago I myself dared to pass the doors of the necromancer in Dol Guldur, and secretly explored his ways, and found thus that our fears were true. He was none other than Sauron, our enemy of old, at length taking shape and power again. Some, too, will remember also that Saruman dissuaded us from open deeds against him, and for long we watched him only. Yet at last, as his shadow grew, Saruman yielded, and the council put forth its strength and drove the evil out of Mirkwood. And that was in the very year of the finding of this ring. A strange chance, if chance it was. But we were too late, as Elrond foresaw. Sauron also had watched us, and had long prepared against our stroke, governing Mordor from afar, through Minas Morgul, where his 9 servants dwelled, until all was ready. Then he gave way before us, but only feigned to flee, and soon after came to the Dark Tower, and openly declared himself. Then for the last time the council met, for now we learned that he was seeking ever more eagerly for the One. We feared then that he had some news of it that we knew nothing of. But Saruman said nay, and repeated what he had said to us before, that the One would never again be found in Middle-earth. At the worst, said he, our enemy knows that we have it not, and that is still lost. But what was lost may be found, he thinks. Fear not, his hope will cheat him. Have I not earnestly studied this matter? Into Anduin the Great it fell, and long ago, while Sauron slept, it was rolled down the river to the sea. There let it lie until the end. Gandalf fell silent, gazing eastward from the porch to the far peaks of the misty mountains, at whose great roots the peril of the world had so long lain hidden. He sighed. There I was at fault, he said. I was lulled by the words of Saruman the Wise, but I should have sought for the truth sooner, and our peril would now be less. We were all at fault, said Elrond. And but for your vigilance, the darkness, maybe, would already be upon us. But say on. From the time my heart misgave me against all reason that I knew, said Gandalf. And I desired to know how this thing came to Gollum, and how long he possessed it. So I set a watch for him, guessing that he would ere before long come from his darkness to seek for his treasure. He came, but he escaped, and was not found. But then, alas, I let the matter rest, watching and waiting only, as we have too often done. Time passed with many cares, until my doubts were awakened again to sudden fear. Whence came the hobbit's ring? What, if my fear was true, should be done with it? Those things I must decide. But I spoke yet of my dread to no one, knowing the peril of an untimely whisper if it went astray. In all the long wars with the Dark Tower, treason has ever been our greatest foe. That was 17 years ago. Soon I became aware that spies of many sorts, even beasts and birds, were gathered round the Shire, and my fear grew. I called for the help of the Dunedain, and their watch was doubled, and I opened in my heart to Aragorn the heir of Isildur. And I, said Aragorn, counselled that we should hunt for Gollum, too late though it may seem. And since it seemed fit that Isildur's heir should labour to repair Isildur's fault, I went with Gandalf on the long and hopeless search. Then Gandalf told how they had explored the whole length of Wilderland, even down to the mountains of Shadow and the fences of Mordor. There we heard rumour of him, and we guessed that he dwelt there long in the dark hills, but we never found him, and at last I despaired. And then in my despair I thought again of a test that might make the finding of Gollum unneeded. The ring itself might tell us if it were the one. The memory of words at the council came back to me, words of Saruman, half-heeded at the time. I heard them now clearly in my heart. The 9, the 7, and the 3, he said, had each their proper gem, not so the one. It was round and unadorned, as it were one of the lesser rings, but its maker set marks upon it that the skilled maybe could still see and read. What those marks were, he had not said. Who now would know? The maker, and Saruman? But great though his lore may be, it must have a source. What hand save Sauron's ever held this thing, ere it was lost? The hand of Isildur alone. With that thought, I forsook the chase and passed swiftly to Gondor. In former days the members of my order had been well received there, but Saruman most of all. Often he had been for long the guest of the lords of the city. Less welcome did the Lord Denethor show me than that of old, and grudgingly he permitted me to search among his hoarded scrolls and books. If indeed you look only, as you say, for records of ancient days and the beginnings of the city, read on, he said. For to me, what was is less dark than what is to come, and that is my care. But unless you have more skilled even than Saruman, who has studied here long, you will find naught that is not well known to me, who am master of the lore of the city. So, said Denethor, and yet there lie in his hoards many records that few can now read, even though the lore masters, for their scripts and tongues have become dark to later men. And Boromir, there lies Minas Tirith still unread, I guess, by any save Saruman and myself since the King's Vale. A scroll that Isildur made himself, for Isildur did not match straight away from the war in Mordor, as some have told in the tale. Some in the north, maybe, Boromir broke in. All know in Gondor that he went first to Minas Anor, and dwelt a while with his nephew Meneldil, instructing him before he committed him to rule in the South Kingdom. In that time he planted there the last sapling of the White Tree in memory of his brother. But in that time also he made this scroll, said Gandalf, and that it is not remembered in Gondor, it would seem, for this scroll concerns the ring, and thus wrote Isildur therein. The great ring shall go now to be an heirloom of the North Kingdom, but records of it shall be left in Gondor, where also dwells the heir of Elendil, lest a time come when the memory of these great matters shall grow dim. And after these words Isildur described the ring, such as he found it. It was hot when I first took it, hot as a gleed, and my hand was scorched, so that I doubt if I ever again shall be free from the pain of it. Yet even as I write it is cooled, and it seemeth to shrink, though it loseth neither its beauty nor its shape. Already the writing upon it, which at first was clear as red flame, fadeth, and is now only barely to be read. It is fashioned in the elven script of Eregion, for they have no letters in Mordor for such subtle work, but the language is unknown to me. I deem it to be a tongue of the Black Land, since it is foul and uncouth. What evil it saith, I do not know, but I trace here a copy of it, lest it fade beyond recall. The ring misseth, maybe, the heat of Sauron's hand, which was black and yet burned like fire, and so Gil-galad was destroyed. And maybe, were the gold made hot again, the writing would be refreshed. But for my part I will risk no hurt to this thing. Of all the works of Sauron the only fair. It is precious to me, though I buy it with great pain. Okay. I'm going to stop here to talk about a few things, and also to catch up on the chat here. Let me catch up here. Okay. Oh, thank you, David Marasso. Thank you for coming by. I'm glad you like the channel. Hope you're enjoying the live stream. The ring would never remain lost. That is absolutely 100% true. As we're going to see, once we're all caught up with everything revolving what happened to the ring, when they start discussing, okay, what are we to do with it? Glorfindel had the idea, well, let's chuck it into the sea. And for those of you who might be old heads who have been on the channel for a long time, my very first episode, the thumbnail question was, why not toss the ring into the sea? Obviously, that would not work. A hater shows up and ruins your peaceful necromancing. Nice. Yeah. Truly he is mighty who can only be bested by God. That is true. That is true. Because the fact that Sauron was beaten required not only a bit of divine intervention, but for everything to go exactly the correct way. Lost is, of course, a matter of perspective. I agree with that. It's a secret to everybody. It's a Zelda reference. Okay. That is The Legend of Zelda, indeed. Will I stop to analyze? Absolutely, yes. I have to. That makes it a copyright thing. And yes, Precious, I was going to talk about this. So, Isildur talks about how when he took the ring off of Sauron's finger, I don't know what he did with the finger, but he noticed that it was very, very hot from the heat of Sauron's hand, and so it was that Gil-galad died. And in some of the other books, we get a more graphic description, we'll say, of Gil-galad's death, that he dies from the burns of Sauron's hand. And in the film version, The Fellowship of the Ring, they show Sauron using this giant mace. And he looks like Morgoth, and he swings this mace, and like 30 guys go flying. It's a great scene, but in the books, he didn't use a weapon. He didn't need a weapon. His weapon was his hands. Anything that he touched would burn. And this is how he killed Gil-galad. He burned him to death. What's a gleed? Okay, so it's it's not spelled that way, but yeah, I'm glad you asked. I'll get to that in a second. Let me make my point about the heat of his hands. So anyway, so Sauron's hands were very hot, and when he took the ring off the finger, once again, I don't know what he did with the finger. I'm assuming that when Sauron, his body withered, I think the finger must have went with it. But anyway, he can see the letters on the ring, but then as it cooled off, he could no longer see it. And he thinks, well, I could probably heat the ring up, and that would show it, but I can't bring myself to do it. It's become precious to me. And this is showing that the ring already has a strong hold on him. And we saw the same thing earlier with Frodo. Frodo, he hands the ring to Gandalf willingly. Gandalf tosses it in the fire. It sits there for a while. Gandalf takes it out. He hands it to Frodo. Frodo, I can't read that. It's Elvish, but it's weird. Gandalf tells him what it means. He tells him what it is. And then it must be destroyed. And Frodo says, yes, I would like to destroy it. And Gandalf says, would you really? Go ahead, toss it in the fire. And Frodo looks at it, and he's like, oh, man, that's pretty. I can't do it, And he knows that the fire is not going to hurt it. It couldn't even heat it up. The ring was cool to the touch. So we see the same thing that happened to Isildur happened to Frodo. That the ring has become so precious to him that he couldn't even do something like that he knows is not going to be able to hurt it. So a gleed is actually a bird. It's kind of a weird sort of usage of it. And if you notice that in Isildur's writing, he's writing in a very Middle English sort of speak. So it is a strange word there, hot as a gleed. Because a gleed is a bird. It's specifically a raptor. And I think he's just using a little bit of metaphor there, like saying sly as a fox, or something like that. And I think that might be Tolkien's example of like a Gondor idiom, so to speak. Tulkas versus Sauron main event. See, the thing about that is, if you notice that whenever somebody challenges Sauron, they challenge him in a specific way. Tulkas would want to wrestle him, and Sauron would hide. He wouldn't be a part of that. He's very magically oriented. I was talking about this in one of the articles that I wrote earlier today, that Finrod died in a pretty messy way. Oh, it wasn't an article, actually. It was a Facebook comment that I was making. Finrod died in a pretty messy way. He challenged Sauron to a singing duel, which is a bad idea. Really, really bad idea. You thought a glede was like a vulture? Well, I mean, a vulture is a carrion bird, but a glede is a bird of prey. So that's why I use the word raptor. And absolutely, without the hobbits and everything, Sauron wins. I mean, there's a lot of things that even if, like the slightest bit changes in the story, then Sauron wins. So, sorry about your Calibeth. Yeah. There was does anybody in the chat, Star Trek fan? There was an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation called Tapestry, and I always come back to this when people ask questions, what would happen if this, what would happen if that? And I always say, just watch this episode. It's called Tapestry. Just get Paramount Plus and just watch it, please. And you'll understand why changing even a small thing ruins the story, because everything falls apart. It's a tapestry. A tapestry is like a mural that is woven, and it tells a story. And if you start tugging at threads that you don't like, the whole thing falls apart. And that was the lesson of that episode. So, yeah. Mr. Rippus, okay, you're a fan. No, it's funny, as a friend of mine, my friend June once said to me, specifically about my mother. And she says to me, it's weird to me that your mother is such a nerd. And I said, who do you think showed me all this stuff? Like, when I was little, she gave me a copy of The Hobbit, and we watched Star Trek together. I mean, glede is also an old word for a glowing ember. Okay, that works. I mean, the way that I know it is a bird, but that actually makes more sense. So there you go. And not only is it a great episode, I think it's one of the best episodes of that show. So there you go. Gondor still rocking. Okay, we're going to continue here. When I read these words, my quest was ended, for the traced writing was indeed as I sealed or guessed, in the tongue of Mordor and the servants of the tower. And what was said therein was already known, for in the day that Sauron first put on the one, Celebrimbor, maker of the three, was aware of him. And from afar he heard him speak these words, and so his evil purposes were revealed. Oh, I have to stop here. I'm sorry. I have to talk about this. So, and this is just a personal thing. So early on in my time on Quora, writing on Quora, I mentioned this, that the elves heard Sauron's voice through their rings. And this guy was like, that didn't happen. And I was like, well, I mean, it did, but, And so, and you run into this in and we have a Discord if anybody's interested. You run into this in any kind of comment section, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, Quora, whatever it is. There's people who will just say the opposite of what you say and say, well, you're wrong, it happened the other way, and they offer no sort of, source or anything. And this guy's like, show me where it says that. And I'm like, well, just read the book right there, man. He says, Celebrimbor heard Sauron's voice. So there you have it. I didn't answer him back then because I can't be bothered with things like that. People who are like, bring me proof. And I'm like, well, yeah, look, I've studied this for decades. If you want to study it for decades, you would know. If you have a nice question you want to ask me in a polite manner, that's one thing. If you're going to demand things, oh man, no, you can do it yourself at that point. But unfortunately, it's unfortunate because then when you tell people to sort of do it themselves, they did sense him, but there it said Celebrimbor held the three. The three were a little bit more attuned, and he hadn't yet handed them out to anybody. And he heard Sauron's voice. And then he goes running around telling everybody, take off the rings, take off the rings. And he brought them to, first he went to Galadriel, and he said, what should I do with these things? And she says, you got to keep them a secret. He doesn't know about those 3. So he gave one to her, and then he brought the other 2 to Gil-galad, and that's what happened to those. Gil-galad kept one. He gave the other one to Círdan. You think his voice is the only physical presence the films show of Sauron? I mean, you see him in the beginning, but I think, it's actually not true. They actually filmed a scene where he showed up at the Black Gate and fought Aragorn. They didn't use that scene, though. But, yeah, you mostly do just hear him, but if you watch the extended version, when Aragorn's holding the Palantir, you do see Sauron in the Palantir. So there is that. He says he heard... I just read it. I'll read it to you again. I won't even do the Gandalf voice this time. Yeah, where was it? 1. Celebrimbor, maker of the 3, was aware of him, and from afar he heard him speak these words, and so his evil purposes were revealed. Says it right there in black and white. Unfortunately, when you tell people, just read it, they don't. They go to one of the wikis. I'm sure you guys have seen the Tolkien wikis. And a friend of mine, my friend Neth, once said to me, well, not just to me, but in my Discord, just in general, that every fandom has at least 2 wikis. And if it maybe they have more, but there's always 2 main wikis, and they're always considered, one is the good wiki and the other is the bad wiki. Now, you guys might know the 2 wikis. One is called the One Wiki to Rule Them All, and the other is called the Tolkien Gateway. And if you want to know from my experiences, the Tolkien Gateway is the good wiki. It's not perfect. There are a lot of mistakes on there as well. There's some conjecture on there, which is not a bad thing, but it should be labeled as conjecture. The One Wiki to Rule Them All is a complete hot mess. And oftentimes people will paste things to me to sort of prove their argument, and they're pasting it directly from the wiki, and it'll even have all the links and everything, and I'm like, dude, you're on the wrong one. First of all, don't use the wikis. Tolkien wrote all these books, and there's 15 books that are reference works. You know what I mean? There's 12 volumes in the history of Middle-earth. There's 2 volumes of the history of The Hobbit, and then there's also the nature of Middle-earth. So those are all reference works that you could use. The wikis can be useful, but you can't rely on them too much. Like the good McDonald's and the bad McDonald's. Every town, if you have 2 McDonald's, one's the good one, and then there's the other one that smells like butt from a mile away. Oh, Mr. Rippus, thank you for joining as a Legendarium Scholar. Welcome in. You'll see all the videos early. You got some emotes that you can use in chat now and everything, so thank you there. So when Sauron had the ring on and the other rings were being worn, they almost acted like a Palantir, where he can see and communicate with them. He could see them. He doesn't communicate with them. It's all in the poem. 1 ring to rule them all, so he can control them. 1 ring to find them. He can identify who has the rings, and he knows where each person is. And 1 ring to bring them all into the darkness, bind them. They become bound to him. Those are all really important words. Find, bind, and rule. Those are the 3 things it does. It's like a one-way Palantir. He can see them. They can't see him. They sensed him, or Celebrimbor sensed him when he spoke those words, because there were the 3 rings that he didn't know about. You can't afford for many months, but you'll stay for as long as you can. Well, I hope that you can stay as long as you'd like to. And like I said, I thank you very much. It is a fantastic way to support the channel. And you have a few emotes there. You see my moderator there just used the Eye of Sauron. It's not the best depiction, but I drew it, so, there we go. You'd love to see more of Sauron, but you don't really. Well, I know I follow your meaning. Like I said, my friend Neth, I mentioned her earlier. She's never read these books, but sometimes I post on my Discord artwork that I use in my articles specifically for her, because she thinks Sauron is cute. So if I find a really sexy picture of him, I'll post it. It's like, here you go, and she's like, ah, yes. All right, let's continue here. I have to find where I left off here. Oh, here we are. "There is little need to tell of them," said Aragorn. "If a man must needs walk in the sight of the Blackgate, or tread the deadly flowers of Morgul Vale, then perils he will have. I, too, despaired at last, and I began my homeward journey. And then, by fortune, I came suddenly on what I sought, the marks of soft feet beside a muddy pool. But now the trail was fresh and swift, and it led not to Mordor, but away. Along the skirts of the dead marshes I followed it. And then I had him. Lurking by a stagnant mere, peering at the water as the dark eve fell, I caught him, Gollum. He was covered in green slime. He will never love me, I fear, for he bit me, and I was not gentle. Nothing more did I ever get from his mouth, and the marks of his teeth. I deemed it the worst part of all my journey, the road back, watching him day and night, making him walk before me with a halter on his neck, gagged, until he was tamed by lack of drink and food, driving him ever towards Mirkwood. I brought him there at last, and gave him to the elves, for we had agreed that this should be done, and I was glad to be rid of his company, for he stank. For my part, I hope never to look upon him again. But Gandalf came and endured long speech with him." All right, let me pause here again just to point out. Well, I think, I'm saying attractive. She finds the popular depictions of him in art to be attractive. This is really funny to me because Aragorn's done a lot in his life. He's 87 years old. He fought in the armies of Rohan and Gondor. He's been all over the place. He's even been inside of Moria. And when they are arguing later about whether they should go through Moria or do literally anything else other than go through Moria, they argue, and the voice that is the most against it is Aragorn. He really doesn't want to go in there. I mean, okay, Boromir too, but Aragorn is like the loudest voice. And here he says the worst thing that he ever had to deal with was Gollum and his stench and the way he kept biting. It's just sort of, And I would agree with that, Toby. I would agree with that because Sauron had to be somebody that was always attractive to anyone, no matter who was looking at him. That was his whole persona. I actually posted some cosplay pictures on my Discord that I had seen earlier, No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. You're androgynous is the word you're looking for, by the way. Okay. "Yes, long and weary," said Gandalf, "but not without profit. For one thing, the tale he told of his loss agreed with that which Bilbo had now told openly for the first time. But that mattered little, since I had already guessed it. But I learned then first that Gollum's ring came out of the great river nigh to the Gladden Fields, and I learned also that he had possessed it long, many lives of his small kind. The power of the ring had lengthened his years far beyond their span, but that power only the great wings yield. And if that is not proof enough, Galdor, there is the other test that I spoke of. Upon this very ring, which you have seen here held aloft, round and unadorned, the letters that Isildur reported may still be read, if one has the strength of will to set the golden thing in the fire a while. That if I have done, and this I have read. Ashnaz durbatuluk, ashnaz grimbatul, ashnaz thratatuluk, ash berzum ishi grimbatul. The change in the wizard's voice was astounding. Suddenly it became menacing, powerful, harsh as stone. A shadow seemed to pass over the high sun, and the porch for a moment grew dark. All trembled, and the elves stopped their ears. "Never before has any voice dared to utter words of that tongue in Imladris, Gandalf the Grey," said Elrond as the shadow passed, and the company breathed once more. "And let us hope that none will ever speak it here again," answered Gandalf. "None the less, I do not ask for your pardon, Master Elrond, for if that tongue is not soon to be heard in every corner of the West, then let us all put doubt aside, that this thing is indeed what the wise have declared, the treasure of the enemy, fraught with all his malice. And in it lies a great part of his strength of old. Out of the black ears came the words that the smiths of Eregin heard, and knew that they had been betrayed." And there it is again. The smiths of Eregin heard it. "One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. Know also, my friends, that I learned more yet from Gollum. He was loth to speak, and his tale unclear, but it is all beyond doubt that he went to Mordor, and that all he knew was forced from him. Thus the enemy knows, now that the one is found, that it is long in the Shire, and since his servants have pursued it almost to our door, he soon will know, already he may know, even as I speak, that we have it here. All sat silent for a while, until at length Boromir spoke. He is a small thing, you say, this Gollum. Small, but great in mischief. What became of him? To what doom did you put him? He is in prison, but no worth, said Aragorn. He has suffered much. There is no doubt that he was tormented, and the fear of Sauron lies black on his heart. Still, I for one am glad that he is safely kept by the watchful elves of Mirkwood. His malice is great, and gives us a strength hardly to be believed in one so lean and withered. He could work much mischief still if he were free, and I do not doubt that he was allowed to leave Mordor on some evil errand. Alas, alas, cried Legolas, and in his fair elvish face there was a great distress. The tidings that I was sent to bring must now be told. They are not good. But only here have I learned how evil they may seem to this company. Smeagol, who is now called Gollum, has escaped. Escaped, said Aragorn. That is ill news indeed. We shall all rue it bitterly, I fear. How come the folk of Thranduil to fail in their trust? Not through lack of watchfulness, said Legolas, but perhaps through overkindliness. And we fear that the prisoner has aid from others. And what is more is known of our doings than we could wish. We guarded this creature day and night at Gandalf's bidding, much though we wearied of the task. But Gandalf bade us hope still for his cure, and we had not the heart to keep him ever in dungeons under the earth, where he would fall back into his old black thoughts. You were less tender to me, said Gloin with a flash in his eyes, as old memories were stirred of his imprisonment in the deep places of the Elven King's halls. Now come, said Gandalf. Pray do not interrupt, my good Gloin. There was a regrettable misunderstanding, long set right. If all the grievances that stand between elves and dwarves are to be brought up here, we may as well abandon the council. Gloin rose and bowed, and Legolas continued. In the days of fair weather we led Gollum through the woods, and there was a high tree standing alone far from the others which he liked to climb. Often we let him mount up to the highest branches until he felt the free wind, but we set a guard by the tree's foot. One day he refused to come down, and the guards had no mind to climb after him. He had learned the trick of clinging to boughs with his feet as well as his hands, so they sat by the tree far into the night. It was that very night of summer, yet moonless and starless, that orcs came on us unawares. We drove them off after some time. They were many and fierce, but they came from over the mountains and were unused to the woods. When the battle was over, we found that Gollum was gone, and his guards were slain or taken. It then seemed plain to us that the attack had been made for his rescue, and that he knew of it beforehand. How that was contrived we cannot guess, but Gollum is cunning, and the spies of the enemy are many. The dark things that were driven out in the year of the dragon's fall have returned in greater numbers, and Mirkwood is again an evil place, save where our realm is maintained. We have failed to recapture Gollum. We came on his trail among those of many orcs, and it plunged deep into the forest going south, but ere long it escaped our skill, and we dared not continue the hunt, for we were drawing nigh to Dol Guldur, and that is still a very evil place. We do not go that way. Well, he is gone, said Gandalf. We have no time to seek for him again. He must do what he will, but he may play a part yet that neither he nor Sauron had foreseen. And now I will answer Galdor's other questions. What of Saruman? What are his counsels to us in need? This tale I must tell in full, for only Elrond has heard it yet, and that in brief, but it will bear on all that we must resolve. It is the last chapter of the Tale of the Ring, so far as it is yet gone. Okay, well, great. Let me... Something happened here. What happened? Wait. What happened? Alice? Okay, there was a lot of things happening here in the chat, and a lot of the messages were deleted. Oh, I see what happened. Thank you for keeping the chat normal. And thank you, David. Yeah, we want to just keep it to the books here, you know. Yes, I see that. I see that now. I see why. Okay, let me just catch up on chat here. I could see you guys really liked the black speech reading, and I will say I have practiced that. I have practiced that quite a bit. So that hold on. I'm just not used to YouTube's chat system here. Okay, so well, we're only going to get through Council of Elrond today. As a matter of fact, I mean, there's only a little bit of it left, but I kind of figured this is the longest chapter in the book here. So here's an interesting thought. How did Gollum escape? Now, we know that they took him out for fresh air. He would go up into this tree. One day he refuses to come down, and they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and they wait. And then eventually, orcs come and attack, and he escapes. And they say, well, we think that was coordinated, but we're not sure how. Legolas doesn't really know what happened here. And really, like, why did this happen? And I came to the conclusion long ago that this wasn't something that Sauron did. This was something that Saruman did. And it's no coincidence that we go directly from that into Gandalf revealing that Saruman the White is a traitor. The orcs came from over the mountains. This is interesting, and they were unused to the woods. If these were Sauron's orcs, they'd be used to Mirkwood, and they wouldn't have come from over the mountains because they're not talking about the Ash Mountains. They're not talking about the Ash Mountains. They're talking about the Misty Mountains. So they came from the east. What's out there? Isengard's out there. How could Sauron have communicated with Gollum? He couldn't have. But what does Saruman, not Sauron, what does Saruman use as spies? Birds. Crabine, specifically. They're a type of crow that can speak. So he goes up, and we had this description in The Hobbit of Bilbo doing this same thing. Go up to the top of the trees in Mirkwood and look up, and there's all these butterflies and these birds around. And I think it was Saruman's spies that told Gollum what to do. That's what I think. Tolkien, of course, doesn't give us a direct answer. This is one of those mysteries. We're not supposed to know this, you know? What is happening in the chat right now? Okay, guys, you gotta, not spam, okay? You gotta not spam. Because that's the issue that we're having right now is people spamming the chat. Let's try to form full sentences. I mean, most people are, but we're having a few people who are just kind of going a little crazy in the chat. Crabine from... Well, no, Crabine from Dunley. Crabine are birds. They can go anywhere, and more Crabine from Isengard, really. Like I said, the orcs came from the east. What's off to the east? You got Isengard out there, you know? Yeah, and please let's not, do any kind of spam or promotion or anything like that. Let's just try to keep it calm, enjoy the reading, ask questions, that kind of thing. Anyway, let's try to stay on topic here. I'm trying to bring it back in here. Sauron's forces would have come from the south. Because what's to the south of Mirkwood? Well, there's Lothlorien, and then beyond that is Mordor. Now, when we get to Lothlorien, we don't know of any orcs passing around there to get up to Mirkwood, but we hear about them coming out of Moria, of course, because of what happened in Moria. But they came from over the mountains. They weren't used to the woods. This tells me they were Uruk-hai. They were from Saruman's neck of the woods. Birds could very well... good night, David. Hope you enjoyed. Have been the messengers here in this case. We don't really know. This is what I call, well, Tolkien called it this too, but I love this phrase, the realm of surmise. The realm of surmise. We must enter the realm of surmise where we don't know the answers to things, and they're not found in the text, but we have to make educated guesses. So, in this way, that's my best educated guess, that the escape of Gollum was engineered by Saruman the White. And from a literary perspective, learning of Gollum's escape and then going directly into Gandalf revealing that Saruman has turned traitor, it sort of makes sense, you know. Sauron could have done it, but then again, you have to remember that these characters tend to think that Sauron does everything. One of the biggest debates regarding the Fellowship of the Ring is what caused the storm over Carithris. In the films, they chose to depict it as Saruman doing this directly, specifically for the reasoning of forcing them to go through Moria, because in the movie version, he knew there was a Balrog there, and apparently so did Gandalf in the movie version. Bombadil is the realm of surmise. I like that. Somebody on Quora said to me that the realm of surmise must be just off the left side of the map, and I love that they said left side of the map because that's the west, the realm of the blessed realm, the undying land, the realm of fairy, the perilous realm. I love that sort of idea. It's just to the left of the map, off the left edge. It's there, but you can't see it. All right, I'm getting off topic here. I'm sorry, guys. But speaking of Saruman and everything, we're going to find out more about him and Radagast and all that. But I like I said, I don't think it's a coincidence, and we must sometimes make these educated guesses. And Tolkien does this on purpose. Carithris, that's what I was talking about. In the book, there's sort of these different theories that come up in the book itself, not people talking about the book. One is that Sauron caused the storm, but why would he do that? Another is that it was just a storm. It was coincidental. Gimli is the one that I think is correct, because Gimli says, you know, these mountains are alive, and some of them are jerks, and Zaraxagil is the biggest jerk. It me 420. Oh, you weren't subscribed to me on YouTube? I'm saying that wasn't a Twitch subscription. Thank you, Itme. Thank you, Itme. So in this case, what we have here is we have a difference of opinion of what, even in the, where are these people coming from? Is he sending people to the channel to be insane in the chat? We had like one person who went crazy, and now it's like he's sending people here, and we're not talking about that, okay? This is not I just want to get this out there. This is not a stream about the Amazon TV show, okay? We're not talking about that. We're talking about this right here, okay? I don't know why we have to have that in the chat. We do not have to have that in the chat. So let's not even go there. But anyway, let's get back into it, because we have about a half hour here to get through, a little bit left in this chapter. At the end of June, I was in the Shire, but a cloud of anxiety was on my mind, and I rode to the southern borders of the little land, for I had a foreboding of some danger, still hidden from me but drawing near. There messengers reached me, telling of war and defeat in Gondor, and when I heard of the Black Shadow, a chill smote my heart, but I found nothing save a few fugitives from the south. Yet it seemed to me that on them sat a fear of which they would not speak. I turned then east and north, and journeyed along Green Way, and not far from Bree, I came upon a traveller sitting on a bank beside the road, with his grazing horse beside him. It was Radagast the Brown, who at one time dwelt at Rosgabel, near the borders of Mirkwood. He is one of my order, but I had not seen him for many a year. Gandalf, he cried, I was seeking you, but I'm a stranger in these parts. All I knew was that you might be found in a wild region with the uncouth name of Shire. Your information was correct, I said. But do not put it that way if you meet any of its inhabitants. You are near the borders of the Shire now. And what do you want with me? It must be pressing. You were never a traveller unless driven by great need. "I have an urgent errand," he said. "My news is evil." Then he looked about him, as if the hedges might have ears. "Nazgul," he whispered. "The nine are abroad again. They have crossed the river secretly and are moving westward. They have taken the guise of riders in black." I knew then what I had dreaded without knowing it. "The enemy must have some great need or purpose," said Radagast. "But what is it that makes him look to these distant and desolate parts I cannot guess." "What do you mean?" said I. "I have been told that wherever they go, the riders ask for news of a land called Shire." "The Shire," I said, but my heart sank, for even the wise might fear to withstand the nine when they are gathered together under their fell chieftain. A great king and sorcerer he was of old, and now he wields a deadly fear. "Who told you and who sent you?" I asked. "Saruman the White," answered Radagast. "And he told me to say that if you feel the need, he will help. And he told me to say that if you feel the need, he will help. But you must seek his aid at once, or it will be too late." And that message brought me hope, for Saruman the White is the greatest of my order. Radagast is, of course, a worthy wizard, a master of shapes and changes of hue. And he has much lore of herbs and beasts, and birds are especially his friends. But Saruman has long studied the arts of the enemy himself, and thus we have often been able to forestall him. It was by the devices of Saruman that we drove him from Dol Guldur. It might be that he has found some weapons that would drive back the nine. I will go back to Saruman," I said. "Then you must go now," said Radagast. "For I have wasted time in looking for you, and the days are running short. I was told to find you before midsummer, and that is now here. Even if you set out from this spot, you will hardly reach him before the nine discover the land that they seek. I myself shall turn back at once." And with that he mounted, and would have ridden straight off. "Stay a moment," I said. "We shall need your help, and the help of all things that will give it. Send out messages to all the beasts and birds that are your friends. Tell them to bring news of anything that bears in this matter to Saruman and Gandalf. Let messages be sent to Orthanc." "I will do that," he said, and rode off as if the nine were after him. Okay. Oh, nothing more uncouth than the Shire. Radagast is interesting. I think it's really interesting that this is the only scene that he's in. We learn a bit about him, from the nature of Middle-earth and from the history of Middle-earth. He's really kind of absent from the Silmarillion. There's a little bit about him in Unfinished Tales. I always felt that he was very interesting. Very, very good comment there that he would have been good friends with Treebeard. Good friends with Treebeard. But the issue is... No, you're good, Mr. Rips. It's just like... when you see, like, somebody sent 5 messages in a row and they're all one word, like a message broken into several messages just flooding the chat, that's what I was talking about. Your comments are good. I like your comments. He's really interesting. I really wish that we knew more about Radagast and what became of him. I personally think he's still out there somewhere, just doing Yavanna's work, basically. We know that he was supposed to be Saruman's good friend, but yeah, that didn't work out. But you're right, he would have gotten along with Treebeard, and it's a shame that they never met, because Treebeard says something very curious in The Two Towers. He says that Gandalf is the only wizard that cares about the trees, and that's how I can say that he never met Radagast, because if he met Radagast, he wouldn't have said that. All right, let's continue here. It's also interesting that he says an uncouth name like Shire. Sort of an interesting thing. Shire is an English name, of course, and it means country. So calling it the Shire is basically saying it's the country. And this is really not all that unusual in Middle-earth. I mean, there's a bit of Gondor, far to the south, called the Bay of Belfalos. You know what Bay means. What does Belfalos mean? It's derived from 2 different Elvish words, Bel and Falos. They have slightly different meanings, but they both refer to the shoreline. So it's like the bay of the shoreline. It's just... You see this kind of thing in languages all the time. There's a type of bear, and this is a real-life thing. There's a type of bear that its scientific name in Latin, when you translate it to English, it's horrible bear. So it's like horribilis, And then it's like, I think Arcturus and Ursulus, which are both mean bear. So horrible bear, bear. So you see this kind of thing in languages. And of course, Tolkien being a language expert, he would know that sort of thing. So Bay of Belfalas is really an example of that sort of thing. And we see it here with the Shire. The Shire means the country. I could not follow him then and there. I had ridden very far already that day, and I was very weary as my horse, and I needed to consider matters. I stayed the night in Bree, and decided that I had no time to return to the Shire. Never did I make a greater mistake. However, I wrote a message to Frodo, and trusted to my friend the innkeeper to send it to him. I rode away at dawn, and I came at long last to the dwelling of Saruman. That is far south in Isengard, at the end of the Misty Mountains, not far from the Gap of Rohan. And Boromir will tell you that it is a great open vale that lies between the Misty Mountains and the northmost foothills of Ered Nimrais, the White Mountains of his home. But Isengard is a circle of sheer rocks that encloses a valley as with a wall, and in the midst of that valley is a tower of stone called Orthanc. It was not made by Saruman, but by the men of Numenor long ago, and it is very tall and has many secrets, yet it looks not to be a work of craft. It cannot be reached save by passing the circle of Isengard, and in that circle there is only one gate. Late one evening I came to the gate, like a great arch in the wall of rock, and it was strongly guarded. But the keepers of the gate were on watch for me, and told me that Saruman awaited me. I rode under the arch, and the gate closed silently behind me, and suddenly I was afraid, though I knew no reason for it. But I rode to the foot of Orthanc, and came to the stair of Saruman. And there he met me and led me up to his high chamber. He wore a ring on his finger. "So you have come, Gandalf," he said to me gravely. But in his eyes there seemed to be a white light, as if a cold laughter was in his heart. "Yes, I have come," I said. "I have come for your aid, Saruman the White," and that title seemed to anger him. "Have you indeed, Gandalf the Grey?" he scoffed. "For aid. It is seldom been heard that Gandalf the Grey sought for aid, once so cunning and so wise, wandering about the lands and concerning himself in every business, whether it belongs to him or not." I looked at him and wondered. "But if I am not deceived," said I, "things are now moving which will require the union of all our strength." "That may be so," he said. "But the thought is late in coming to you. How long, I wonder, have you concealed from me the head of the council, a matter of greatest import? What brings you now from your lurking place in the Shire?" "The 9 have come forth again," I answered. "They have crossed the river, so Radagast said to me." "Radagast the Brown," laughed Saruman, and he no longer concealed his scorn. "Radagast the bird-tamer, Radagast the simple, Radagast the fool. Yet he had just the wit to play the part that I sent him, for you have come, and that was all the purpose of my message. And here you will stay, Gandalf the Grey, and rest from journeys, for I am Saruman the Wise, Saruman Ringmaker, Saruman of many colours." I looked then that I saw that his robes, which had seemed white, were not so, but were woven of all colours, if he moved, they shimmered and changed hue, so that the eye was bewildered. "I liked white better," I said. "White," he sneered. "It serves as a beginning. White cloth may be dyed. The white page can be overwritten, and the white light can be broken." "In which case it is no longer white," said I. "And he that breaks a thing to find out what it is, has left the path of wisdom." I have to start here. And he is bitter, and he is pathetic, and he is petty. You're absolutely right. You're trying to learn more about these great works. You're a novice. Your novices are fully welcome here. I hope to break it all down in ways that are easy to understand. Now, here is something interesting. Now, Tolkien, many, many times over, including in the foreword of this very book, said that he does not like allegory. An allegory is when the author uses a work to teach a specific lesson and through symbolism. And he does not do this. He uses a work to tell a story from which can be derived many lessons, some of them from the mind of the author, some of them from the mind of the reader. He called this applicability or application. There is no one lesson to be taken from The Lord of the Rings. There are many, many, many lessons, some of which he thought and some of which he did not think. And we see a lot of Tolkien's thoughts on practical sciences versus natural sciences. Now, the ultimate embodiment of what Tolkien called natural sciences is Tom Bombadil. The embodiments of the practical sciences we see in characters like Sauron and Saruman. They're more interested in things than they are in people. And here he says, Gandalf, somebody who breaks something to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. And there is where you can see the thoughts of the author through his characters, and people think that's an allegory. It's not an allegory. It's just that in any work, the thoughts of the author come through on a great many things, and you could choose to apply that as this lesson or that lesson or any, way. Tolkien felt that allegory was obvious and distasteful, so he didn't use it in The Lord of the Rings. He used it in one story, which I will read here at one point. It's called Leaf by Niggle, and it's absolutely a fantastic story as allegories go. Leaf by Niggle is about this little man named Niggle, and Niggle is a painter, and he paints a picture of a leaf. And, he starts with a leaf, and it's a fantastic leaf. And then from that, he makes a branch, and then a tree, a forest, and a village, and mountains and rivers. And he never finishes it. And in the end, all that's remembered is the leaf. And in this case, this is an allegory, and Tolkien did cop to this, and he said that he was Niggle, and the leaf is the Lord of the Rings, and the rest of it is the Silmarillion. Because what do people know him for? They know him for the Lord of the Rings. They know him for the Hobbit. They know where he started. They don't know the rest of the story, even though so much of it is here. So we don't see an allegory here. We just see the author's thoughts coming through, his opinion on natural sciences and practical sciences coming through Gandalf. There are a few characters that act sometimes as Tolkien's mouthpiece. There's Gandalf, of course, Bilbo on occasion, Faramir a lot when we get to Faramir. Faramir is the one character that speaks for Tolkien the most, I would say. Okay, where was I? You need not speak to me as one of the fools that you take for friends are, said he. I have not brought you hither to be instructed by you, but to give you a choice. He drew himself up and then began to declaim, as if he were making a speech long rehearsed. The elder days are gone, the middle days are passing, the younger days are beginning. The time of the elves is over, but our time is at hand, the world of men which we must rule. But we must have power to order all things as we will, for that good which only the wise can see. And listen, Gandalf, my old friend and helper, he said, coming near and speaking now in a softer voice. I said we, for we it may be, if you will join with me. A new power is rising. Against it the old allies and policies will not avail us at all. There is no hope left in elves or dying Numenor. This, then, is the one choice before you, before us. We may join with that power. It would be wise, Gandalf. There is hope that way. Its victory is at hand, and there will be a rich reward for those that aided it. As the power grows, its proved friends will also grow, and the wise, such as you and I, may, with patience, come at last to direct its courses, to control it. We can bide our time. We can keep our thoughts in our hearts, deploring maybe evils done by the way, but approving the high and ultimate purpose, knowledge, rule, order, all of the things we have so far striven in vain to accomplish, hindered rather than helped by our weak or idle friends. There would not be any real change in our designs, only in our means. Saruman, I said, I have heard speeches of this kind before, but only in the mouths of emissaries sent from Mordor to deceive the ignorant. I cannot think that you brought me so far only to weary my ears." He looked at me sidelong and paused a while, considering. "Well, I see that this wise course does not commend itself to you," he said. "Not yet. Not if some better way can be contrived." He came and laid his long hand on my arm. "And why not, Gandalf?" he whispered. "Why not? The ruling ring? If we could command that, then the powers would pass to us. That is, in truth, why I brought you here, for I have many eyes in my service, and I believe you know where this precious thing now lies. Is it not so? Or why did the Nine ask for the Shire? And why is your business there?" And he said this with a lust which could not conceal shone suddenly in his eyes. "Saruman," I said, standing away from him, "only one hand at a time can wield the one, and you know that well. So do not trouble to say we. But I would not give it, nay, I would not even give news of it to you, now that I learn your mind. You were once head of the council, but you have unmasked yourself at last. Well, the choices are, it seems, to submit to Sauron or to yourself. I will take neither. Have you others to offer?" He was cold now and perilous. "Yes," he said. "I did not expect you to show wisdom, and even in your own behalf. But I gave you the chance of aiding me willingly, and so saved yourself much trouble and pain. The third choice is to stay here until the end." "Until what end?" "Until you reveal to me where the one may be found. I may find means to persuade you. Or until it is found in your despite, and the ruler has time to turn to lighter matters, to devise, say, a fitting reward for the hindrance and insolence of Gandalf the Grey." "That may not prove to be one of your lighter manners," said I. He laughed at me, for my words were empty, and he knew it. They took me and set me alone on the pinnacle of Orthanc, in the place where Saruman was accustomed to watch the stars. There was no descent save by a narrow stair of many thousand steps, and the valley below seems far away. I looked on, and saw that, whereas it had been green and fair, it was now filled with pits and forges. Wolves and orcs were housed in Isengard. For Saruman was mustering a great force for his own account in rivalry of Sauron, and not in his service yet. Over all the works a dark smoke hung, and wrapped itself around the sides of Orthanc. I stood alone, on an island in the clouds, and I had no chance of escape, and my days were bitter. I was pierced with cold, and I had but little room in which to pace to and fro, brooding on the coming of the riders of the north. That the Nine had indeed arisen I felt assured, apart from the words of Saruman, which might be lies. Long ere I came to Isengard I heard tidings by the way that could not be mistaken. Fear was ever in my heart for my friends in the Shire, but I still had some hope. I hoped that Frodo had set forth at once, as my letter had urged, and that he had reached Rivendell before the deadly pursuit began. But both my fear and my hope proved ill-founded, for my hope was founded on a fat man in Bree, and my fear was founded on the cunning of Sauron. But fat men who sell ale have many calls to answer, and the power of Sauron is still less than fear makes it. But in the circles of Isengard, trapped and alone, it was not easy to think that the hunters before whom all have fled or fallen would falter in the Shire far away. "I saw you!" cried Frodo. "You were walking backward and forward. The moon shone in your hair." Gandalf paused, astonished, and looked at him. "It was only a dream," said Frodo. "But it suddenly came back to me. I had quite forgotten it. It came some time ago, after I left the Shire, I think." "Then it was late in coming," said Gandalf, "as you will see. I was in an evil plight, and those who know me will agree that I have seldom been in such need, and do not bear such misfortune well. Gandalf the Grey, caught like a fly on a spider's treacherous web, yet even the most subtle spiders may leave a weak thread." Okay, I will pause here. And okay, so I pointed this out when he had the dream, that he saw a tower with a figure standing on it. And I said, that's Gandalf. And here Frodo comes to realize this, and Gandalf is surprised. This tells me that this isn't something that Gandalf did consciously in reaching out to Frodo in his dreams. The fact that Frodo was in Tom Bombadil's house has a lot to do with this. It's really important to remember that. A lot of very strange things happened here. But here's the really important thing, is Gandalf himself, his nature. His name, Gandalf, means wand elf. It's not that interesting. He's a long-lived guy. Some people who met him thought he was a very, very old elf. He carried a cane. That's all that means. Mithrandir is Grey Pilgrim. He has a lot of other names, but his original name is Olorin. And Tolkien never gave us an exact meaning of what Olorin means. But the closest that we could come from breaking down the syllables in Quenya is dreamer. He is associated with dreams. When he was young, he walked among the elves. He was very shy, but he walked among them hidden, invisible. He gave them fair dreams. He gave them wisdom. He whispered into their minds and told them things and gave them their wisdom. So here he is doing what he does best, giving Frodo a dream without even realizing it, because he's surprised by that. And of course, he's an Orthanc. Frodo is in the Old Forest at this point. Bombadil, he has this magic little realm of his own where he is the master and none other. And if you notice, Frodo starts having prophetic dreams the closer he gets to Bombadil. And then they stop happening afterwards, after he leaves there. He has a dream about climbing a tower and seeing the shoreline. That's sort of a foreshadowing to his eventual fate. We talked about that then. Let me catch up on chat here a little bit here. Hitchcock had the same view on allegory. Yes, a lot of people had the same view. Some people prefer allegory. I don't mind stories that are allegories, as long as they're not too obvious and heavy-handed, I sound like Saruman? I would hope so. I was doing his voice. Gandalf has a photographic memory. I would say I agree with Mr. Rivers. He does not have a photographic memory. He's forgotten more things than you or I will ever know. So we'll say that. Does he invoke the great Barlaam Butterbur? Maybe Tom works as a dream antenna. I think that's really close to the truth. I would say that, it's interesting the words that Gandalf uses to the Balrog. I am a servant of the secret fire. When we get to that part, I'm going to break down every word in that speech. And we're going to talk at length about that. That's obviously not going to be today. We're going to finish the chapter today and we're going to stop. But the secret fire, the flame imperishable, whatever you want to call it, the light of creation, Bombadil is of that. He is not Iluvatar. He's not God. But he's of Iluvatar. He's not one of the Ainur. He's not an angel. He's something of his own. I call him a spirit of the land itself. Spirit of Middle Earth. If not the whole world, if not all of Arda, but specifically Middle Earth, because that's where he's always been, and that's where he always would be. You thought there was already a part 2 of this? We're on part 7. This is my 7th stream of this, if that's what you're referring to. I'll let you know when the next streams are going to be. I have a very busy schedule, and I don't like to do them like back to back to back. So, yeah. But unfortunately, because this is the longest chapter, it's the only chapter we have time for today. We still have a little bit left. As you can see right here, that's what we have left. So let's continue on here. All right. At first I feared, as Saruman no doubt intended, that Radagast had also fallen. Yet I had caught no hint of anything wrong in his voice or his eye at our meeting. If I had, I should never have gone to Isengard, or I should have gone more warily. So Saruman guessed, and he had concealed his mind and deceived his messenger. It would have been useless in any case to try and win over the honest Radagast to treachery. He sought me in good faith, and so persuaded me. That was the undoing of Saruman's plot, for Radagast knew no reason why he should not do as I asked, and he rode away toward Mirkwood, where he had many friends of old. And the eagles of the mountains went far and wide, and they saw many things, the gathering of wolves and the mustering of orcs, and the 9 riders going hither and thither into the land. and they heard news of the escape of Gollum, and they sent a messenger to bring these tidings to me. I will respectfully disagree with Professor Olsen on that. I usually agree with him. I would respectfully disagree that he is an Ainur because he was there in the world before the Ainur came into it. I would say that he is a spirit, but he is not one of the spirits that sang in the Ainulin Dale. He is uniquely created in the world. He is of the world. He is not of the void. The Ainur are of the void. Like I said, I think Dr. Olsen's fantastic. I don't agree with him on everything. 99% of things, I will respectfully disagree with him on that. A lot of people think he's Ainur, but he kind of tells you right in that chapter that he's not. He says that he was there. He was old when the world was young. He was there before the first raindrop, before the first acorn. He was there before the Dark Lord came from the outside, meaning before Melkor came into the world. And we know that the Ainur all came into the world at the same time. Tulkas kind of floated out in space for a while, and that he didn't descend to Arda until he saw a fight. But he was within Ea, the created world. And if you agree with Corey, that's fine. That's fine. We're all entitled to our own opinions here. And I've talked with him a few times, and he's a great guy, and he's also very, very tolerant of other people's opinions and everything. So, yeah. All right, let's try and finish this here. Let's see. So it was when summer waned, there came a night of moon, and Gwaihir the Wind Lord, swiftest of the great eagles, came unlooked for to Orthanc, and he found me standing on the pinnacle. Then I spoke to him, and he bore me away before Saruman was aware. I was far from Isengard ere the wolves and orcs issued from the gate to pursue me. How far can you bear me? I said to Gwaihir. Many leagues, said he, but not to the ends of the earth. I was sent to bear tidings, not burdens. Then I must have a steed on land, I said, and a steed surpassingly swift, for I have never heard such need of haste before. Then I shall bear you to Edoras, where the Lord of Rohan sits in his halls, he said, for that is not very far off. And I was glad, for in the river mark of Rohan the Rohirrim, the horse lords, dwell, and there are no horses like those that are bred in the great vale between the misty mountains and the white. Are the men of Rohan still to be trusted, do you think? I said to Gwaihir, for the treason of Saruman had shaken my faith. They pay a tribute of horses, he answered, and send many yearly to Mordor, or so it is said, but they are not yet under the yoke. But if Saruman has become evil, as you say, then their doom cannot be long delayed. You like to think he is a person of nature. I think he is of nature. He's not a person like me, you are, or that I am, but he is of nature. I think you're really close to it there. Okay, so just to pause here, and so we hear about this a bit later. Gandalf's shook here. It's like, wow, Saruman's gone bad. This is crazy. Can I trust Rohan? And Gwaihir, the Lord of the Eagles, is like, I don't know. They give horses to Mordor. We find out they don't. We find out later that they don't give horses to Mordor. Mordor came to Rohan asking for horses. They were told to kick rocks, so they did what you do, and they just stole the horses instead. But there is this rumor going around that they're sending horses to Mordor. So the Lord of the Eagles is a little off there, which we learn later, but it is a rumor that he heard. That's why he says, or so they say. He set me down in the land of Rohan ere dawn, and now I have lengthened my tale overlong. The rest must be more brief. In Rohan I found evil already at work. The lies of Saruman and the king of the land would not listen to my warnings. He bade me to take a horse and be gone, and I chose one much to my liking, but little to his. I took his best horse in his land, and I have never seen the like of him. Then he must be a noble beast indeed, said Aragorn, and it grieves me more than any tidings. It might seem worse to learn that Sauron levies such tribute. It was not so when I was last in that land. Nor is it now, I will swear, said Boromir. It is a lie that comes from the enemy. I know the men of Rohan, true and valiant, are allies, dwelling still in the lands that we gave them long ago. "The shadow of Mordor lies on distant lands," answered Aragorn. "Saruman has fallen under it. Rohan is beset. Who knows what you will find there if you ever return?" "Not this, at least," said Boromir, "that they will buy their lives with horses. They love their horses next to their kin. And not without reason, for the horses of the Riddermark come from the fields of the north, far from the shadow, and their race, as that of their masters, is descended from the free days of old." Okay, pause here. Boromir is being obstinate and not listening to people, but he's right. This is one of the instances where Boromir is 100% correct. He is standing up for Rohan, and he's right to do so. Yes, the king is kind of a thrall at this point to Wormtongue, and Wormtongue is, of course, a thrall to Saruman, but they're not giving horses to Mordor. He knows that that's not true. "True indeed," said Gandalf. "And there is one among them that might have been foaled in the morning of the world. The horses of the Nine cannot vie with him, tireless, swift as the flowing wind. Shadowfax they called him. By day his coat glistens like silver, and by night it is like a shade, and he passes unseen. Light is his footfall. Never before had any man mounted him, but I took him and I tamed him, and so speedily he bore me that I reached the Shire when Frodo was on the Barrow Downs, though I set out from Rohan only when he set out from Hobbiton. But fear grew in me as I rode. Even as I came north I heard tidings of the riders, and though I gained on them day by day, they were ever before me. They had divided their forces, I learned. Some remained on the eastern borders, not far from the Greenway, and some invaded the Shire from the south. I came to Hobbiton, and Frodo had gone, but I had words with old Gamgee. Many words, and few to the point. He had much to say about the shortcomings of the new owners at Bag End. I can't abide changes, said he. Not at my time of life. And least of all changes for the worst. Changes for the worst, he repeated many times. Worst is a bad word, I said to him, and I hope you do not live to see it. But amidst his talk I gathered at last that Frodo had left Hobbiton less than a week before, and that a black horseman had come to the hill the same evening. Then I rode on in fear. I came to Buckland and found it in an uproar, as busy as a hive of ants that had been stirred with a stick. I came to the house at Crickhollow, and it was broken open and empty, but on the threshold there lay a cloak that had been Frodo's. Then for a while hope left me, and I did not wait to gather news. Or I might have been comforted, but I rode out on the trail of the riders. It was hard to follow. But it went for many ways, and I was at a loss. But it seemed to me that one or two had ridden toward Bree, and that way I went, for I thought of words that might be said to the innkeeper. Butterbur, they call him, thought I. If this delay was his fault, I will melt all the butter in him. I will roast the old fool over a slow fire. He expected no less, and when he saw my face he fell down flat and began to melt on the spot. What did you do to him? Cried Frodo in alarm. He was really very kind to us and did all that he could. Gandalf laughed. Don't be afraid, he said. I did not bite, and barked very little. So overjoyed was I by the news that I got out of him that when he stopped talking, that I embraced the old fellow. How it happened I could not then guess, but I learned that you had been in Bree the night before and had gone off that morning with Strider. Strider, I cried, shouting for joy. Ah, yes, sir, I'm afraid so, sir. I'm afraid so, sir, said Butterbur, mistaking me. He got at them in spite of all that I could do, and he took up at them, and they behaved very queer all the time, and they were here, wilful, you might say. Ass! Fool! Thrice worthy and beloved Barlaman, said I. It's the best news I've had since midsummer. It's worth a gold piece at the least. May your bier be laid under an enchantment of surpassing excellence for 7 years, said I. Now I can take a night's rest, the first I've had forgotten when. Boromir is cool. He's got flaws, but he's a cool guy, you know? Yeah, no, Tolkien absolutely identified with Faramir, 100%. You identify most with Boromir and Gollum. Really, Gollum is interesting. I can understand Boromir. Gollum is an interesting one. I'd like to hear more about that at some point. Probably not right now, but at some point you're going to have to tell me about that. So I stayed there that night, wondering much of what had become of the riders, for only 2 had there yet been any news of in Bree, it seemed. But in the night we heard more. 5 at last came from the west, and they threw down the gates and passed through Bree like a howling wind. And the Bree folk all shivering and expecting the end of the world. I got up before dawn and went after them. I do not know, but it seems clear to me that this is what happened. The captain remained in secret away south of Bree, while 2 rode ahead through the village and 4 more invaded the Shire. But when those were foiled in Bree and at Crickhollow, they returned to their captain with tidings, and so left the road unguarded for a while, except by their spies. The captain then sent them eastward, straight across the country, and he himself with the rest rode along the road in great wrath. I galloped to Weathertop like a gale, and I reached it before sundown on my 2nd day from Bree. And they were there before me. They drew away from me, for they felt the coming of my anger, and dared not face it while the sun was in the sky. But they closed round at night, and I was besieged on the hilltop, in the old ring of Amon Sul. I was hard put to it indeed. Such light and flame cannot have been seen on Weathertop since the war beacons of old. At sunrise I escaped, and fled toward the north. I could not hope to do more. It was impossible to find you, Frodo, in the wilderness, and that would have been folly to try with all the 9 at my heels, so I had to trust to Aragorn. But I hoped to draw some of them off, and yet reach Rivendell ahead of you and send out help. 4 riders did indeed follow me, but they turned back after a while, and made for the fort, it seemed. That helped a little, for there were only 5, not 9, when your camp was attacked. I reached here at last by long, hard road up the Hoar Well and through the Etten moors, and down from the north. It took me nearly 14 days from Weathertop, where I could not ride among the rocks of the Trollfells, and Shadowfax departed. I sent him back to his master, but a great friendship had grown between us, and I will have need. And if I have need, he will come at my call. But so it was that I came to Rivendell only 3 days before the ring, and news of its peril had already been brought there, which proved well indeed. And that, Frodo, is the end of my account. May Elrond and the others forgive the length of it, but such a thing has not happened before that Gandalf broke tryst and did not come when he had promised. An account to the ring-bearer, so strange an event is required, I think. Well, the tale is now told from first to last. Here we all are, and here is the ring, but we have yet come any nearer to our purpose. What shall we do with it? Are you talking about the little emblem next? That is the G rune. If you see that channel members have, it stands for Gandalf. It's actually Gandalf's emblem. And as you join the channel, you get that, and you get access to some emotes. I'll show you the emotes, actually. I'm going to put them in the chat. There's 3 of them right now. I will have to create more as we do more streams. So you could see that there is a ring, an Eye of Sauron, and a Silmaril. I need to get rid of this thing now. The issue here is that I'm still getting used to how this all works. So. Give me 1 second here. So that's what that is. It's the G rune. It's out of Tolkien's runic alphabet. That's the letter G. Okay. It's the letter Feo in Old English. Okay. Yeah, if you... I believe it's... Well, do I have the Return of the King here? Yeah. If you look in the Return of the King... Ah, here we are. Look at that. You could see it right there. That's the runic alphabet there. It's called the Angarthas, which are the runes of the north. So that one is G, and that's what Gandalf uses as sort of his sigil. All right. There was a silence. At last Elrond spoke again. "This is grievous news concerning Saruman," he said, "for we trusted him, and he is deep in all of our counsels. It is perilous to study too deeply the arts of the enemy, for good or for ill. But such falls and betrayals, alas, have happened before. Of the tales that we have heard this day, the tale of Frodo was the most strange to me. I have known few hobbits save Bilbo here, and it seems to me that he is perhaps not so alone and singular as I have thought him. The world has changed much since I was last in the westward roads. The Barrow-wights we know by many names, and of the old forest many tales have been told. All that now remains is but an outlier of its northern march. Time was when a squirrel could go from tree to tree, from what is now the Shire to Dunland west of Isengard. In those lands I journeyed once, and many things wild and strange I knew, but I had forgotten Bombadil. If indeed this is still the same that walked under the wood and hills long ago, And even then, he was older than the old. That was then not his name. Iarwin ben Adar we called him, oldest and fatherless. But many other name he has been given since by other folk. Forn by the dwarves, Orald by the northern men, and other names besides. He is a strange creature, but maybe I should have summoned him to our council. He would not have come, said Gandalf. Could we not still send messages to him and obtain his help? Asked Erestor. It seems that he has a power even over the ring. No, I should not put it so, said Gandalf. Say rather that the ring has no power over him. He is his own master, but he cannot alter the ring itself nor break its power over others. And now he is withdrawn into a little land, within bounds that he has set, though none can see them, waiting perhaps for a change of days, and he will not step beyond them. But within those bounds nothing seems to dismay him, said Erestor. Would he not take the ring, and keep it there forever harmless? No, said Gandalf, not willingly. He might do so if all the free folk of the world begged him, but he would not understand the need. And if he were given the ring, he would soon forget it or most likely throw it away. Such things have no hold on his mind. He would be a most unsafe guardian, and that alone is answer enough. But in any case, said Glorfindel, to send the ring to him would only postpone the day of evil. He is far away. We could not now take it back to him unguessed, unmarked by any spy. And even if we could, soon or late the Lord of the Rings would learn of its hiding place, and would bend all his power towards it. Could that power be defied by Bombadil alone? I think not. I think that in the end, if all else is conquered, Bombadil will fall, last as he was first, and the night will come. I know little of Iarwen save the name, said Galdor. But Glorfindel, I think, is right. Power to defy our enemy is not in him, unless such power is in the earth itself. That's important. Power to defy Sauron is not in Bombadil unless it's in the earth itself. This is why I call him a spirit of the land. He is a representation of the earth itself. And yet we see that Sauron can torture and destroy the very hills. What power still remains lies with us here in Imladris, or with Círdan at the Havens, or in Lorien. But have they the strength? Have we here the strength to withstand the enemy? The coming of Sauron at the last, when all else is overthrown? I have not the strength, said Elrond. Neither have they. Then, if the ring cannot be kept from him forever by strength, said Glorfindel, two things only remain for us to attempt, to send it over the sea, or to destroy it. But Gandalf has revealed to us that we cannot destroy it by any craft that we here possess, said Elrond. And they who dwell beyond the sea would not receive it, for good or ill it belongs to Middle-earth. It is for us who still dwell here to deal with it. Then, said Glorfindel, let us cast it into the deeps, and so make the lies of Saruman come true. For it is clear now that even as the council, his feet are already on a crooked path. He knew then that the ring was not lost forever, but wished us to think so, for he began to lust for it himself. Yet often lies truth is hidden. In the sea it would be safe. Not safe forever, said Gandalf. There are many things in the deep waters, and seas and lands may change, and it is not our part here to take thought only for a season, or for a few lives of men, or for a passing age of the world. We should seek a final end to this menace, even if we do not hope to make one. And that we shall not find it on the roads to the sea, said Galdor. If the return to Iarwain be thought dangerous, then flight to the sea is now fraught with gravest peril. My heart tells me that Sauron will expect us to take the western way. When he learns what has befallen, he soon will. The 9 have been unhorsed indeed, but that is but a respite, ere they will find new steeds and swifter. Only the waning might of Gondor now stands between him and a march in power along the coast to the north. And if he comes a-sailing to the White Towers and the Havens, hereafter the elves may have no escape from the lengthening shadows of Middle-earth. Long yet will that march be delayed, said Boromir. Gondor wanes, you say, but Gondor stands, and even at the end of its strength it is still very strong. And yet its vigilance can no longer keep back the 9, said Galdor, and other roads he may find that Gondor does not guard. Then, said Erestor, there are but 2 courses, as Glorfindel has declared, to hide the ring forever or to unmake it, but both are beyond our power. Who will read this riddle for us? Okay, I have to catch up with chat. I'm noticing it's moving quickly here. You study Old English. That's really, really interesting. And yes, it's absolutely based on that runic alphabet. If you study Old English, you should be pretty familiar with a lot of Tolkien stories because a lot of them are very, very derivative of Beowulf, which he studied and taught at Oxford. Your edition of Fellowship is from 1965. Shows no misspellings of Gandalf on page 252. Very interesting. It might be just like this specific edition. Let me see. Who published this? We talked about this earlier. There was a Gandalf on page 252 in my copy here. This is the second edition from Houghton Mifflin Company of Boston. So it just might be their error. I believe this was printed in 1978. All right, let's continue because we only have like 3 pages left, and we have to end stream soon. So let's get through these last 3. We'll talk about it, and I will go over some schedule stuff before we end. Let's see. None here can do so, said Elrond gravely. At least none can foretell what will come to pass if we take this road or that. But it seems to be now clear which is the road we must take. The westward road seems easiest, therefore it must be shunned. It will be watched. Too often the elves have fled that way. Now at this last we must take a hard road, a road unforeseen. There lies our hope, if hope it be, to walk into peril, to Mordor. We must send the ring to the fire. How many editions are there? I wouldn't know. They keep the Lord of the Rings has been in publication since the 50s. It's still new editions coming out. Some of them illustrated, some of them gilded, some of them illuminated and such things. I mean, where is it? It's not here. I just got myself a new Silmarillion just a little while ago that has some wonderful illustrations in it. Next time I stream, I'll have it ready to show. Silence fell again. Frodo, even at that fair house, looking out upon a sunlit valley filled with the noise of clear waters, felt a dead darkness in his heart. Boromir stirred, and Frodo looked at him. He was fingering his great horn and frowning. At length he spoke. I do not understand all this, he said. Saruman is a traitor, but did he not have a glimpse of wisdom? Why do you speak ever of hiding and destroying? Why should we not think of that the great ring has come to our hands to serve us in the very hour of need? Wielding it, the free lords of the free may surely defeat the enemy. That is what he most fears, I deem. The men of Gondor are valiant, and they will never submit, but they may be beaten down. Valor needs first strength and then a weapon. Let the ring be your weapon if it has such power as you say. Take it and go forth to victory. Alas, no, said Elrond. We cannot use the ruling ring. That we now know all too well. It belongs to Sauron and was made by him alone, and is altogether evil. Its strength, Boromir, is too great for anyone to wield at will, save only those who already have a great power of their own. But for them it holds an even deadlier peril. The very desire of it corrupts the heart. Consider Saruman. If any of the wise should with this ring overthrow the Lord of Mordor using his own arts, he would then set himself on Sauron's throne, and yet another Dark Lord would appear. And that is another reason why the ring should be destroyed. As long as it is in the world, it will be a danger, even to the wise, for nothing is evil in the beginning. Even Sauron was not so. I fear to take the ring to hide it. I will not take the ring to wield it. Nor I, said Gandalf. Oh, that's a good resource. There you go. Thank you, Alice. Boromir looked at them doubtfully, but he bowed his head. So be it, he said. Then in Gondor we must trust to such weapons as we have. And at the least, while the wise ones guard this ring, we will fight on. Mayhap the sword that was broken may still stem the tide if the hand that wields it is inherited not an heirloom only, but the sinews of the kings of men. Who can tell, said Aragorn, but we will put it to the test one day. May the day not be too long delayed, said Boromir, for though I do not ask for aid, we need it. It would comfort us to know that others fought also with us all the means that they have. Then be comforted, said Elrond, for there are other powers and realms that you know not, and they are hidden from you. Anduin the Great flows past many shores ere it comes to Argonath and the gates of Gondor. Still, it might be well for all, said Gloin the dwarf, if all these strengths were joined and the powers of each were used in league. Other rings there may be, less treacherous, if that might be used in our need. The 7 are lost to us, if Balin has not found the ring of Thror, which was now the last. Naught has been heard of it since Thror perished in Moria. Indeed, I may now reveal that it was partly in hope to find the ring that Balin went away. Balin will find no ring in Moria, said Gandalf. Thror gave it to Thrain his son, but not Thrain to Thorin. It was taken with torment from Thrain in the dungeons of Dol Guldur. I came too late. Ah, alas, cried Gawain. When will the day come of our revenge? But still there are the 3. What of the 3 rings of the elves? Very mighty rings, it is said. Do not the elf lords keep them? Yet they were made by the Dark Lord long ago. Are they idle? I see elf lords here. Will they not say? The elves returned no answer. Did you not hear me, Gloin? Said Elrond. The 3 were not made by Sauron, nor did he ever touch them. But of them it is not permitted to speak. So much only, in this hour of doubt, I may now say, they are not idle. But they were not made as weapons of war or conquest. That is not their power. Those who made them did not desire strength or domination or hoarded wealth, but understanding, making, and healing, to preserve all things unstained. These things the elves of Middle-earth have in some measure gained, though with sorrow. But all that has been wrought by those who wield the 3 will turn to their undoing, and their minds and hearts will become revealed to Sauron if he regains the 1. It would be better if the 3 had never been. That is his purpose. So just to briefly pause here to say that it's really interesting that Gloin is asking about the 3, and Elrond's sort of like, yeah, I really don't want to talk about that, and 2 of the 3 rings are in the room. Well, I should say in the porch sort of veranda area that they're at. They're kind of outside at this point. But, of course, Elrond has Vilya, the Ring of Air, which was given to him by Gil-galad, and the other one, Gandalf actually has, Narya, the Red Ring of Fire, and that was given to him by Círdan the Shipwright when he first arrived in Middle-earth. And it's actually the reason why Gandalf, in the many thousands of years that he's been in Middle-earth, is not any older than when he first arrived. Saruman has grown older, but Gandalf has not. Dwarves always got the short end of the stick. Yeah, they really do. They really do, but they wind up, in the end, they do recapture Moria. It's buried in a very, very obscure reference in the book, The Peoples of Middle-earth, where there is a revised family tree of the dwarves that is more current than the one found in The Return of the King, and it revises the parentage of Durin the Seventh, the Last, and that he was not a descendant of Dain the Second or Dain's son, Thorin the Third Stonehelm, but he was actually Thorin the Third's son, making him Dain's grandson, and that he did reestablish Khazad-dûm, and that the dwarves did very well for themselves in the Fourth Age. They had a colony in Ithilien, they had a colony in the Glittering Caves in Rohan, but yeah. Yeah, they're like, what are you talking about? What elf rings? Yeah. Elrond knows his mother-in-law has the other, I guess. Yes, all of the bearers of the 3 know who the other bearers of the 3 are. And his mother-in-law, of course, is Galadriel, and she does have Nenya, the Ring of Adamant. All right, let's see. But what then would happen if the ruling ring were destroyed, as you counsel? Asked Gloin. We know not for certain, answered Elrond sadly. Some hope that the 3 rings, which Sauron has never touched, would then become free, and their rulers might heal the hurts of the world that he has wrought. But maybe when the one has gone, the 3 will fail, and many fair things will fade and be forgotten. That is my belief. Yet all the elves are willing to endure this chance, said Glorfindel, if by the power of Sauron may be broken, and the fear of his dominion be taken away forever. Thus we return once more to the destroying of the ring, said Erestor. And yet we come no nearer. What strength have we for the finding of the fire in which it was made? That is the path of despair. Of folly, I would say, and the long wisdom of Elrond did not forbid me. Despair or folly? Said Gandalf. It is not despair, for despair is only for those who see the end beyond all doubt. We do not. It is wisdom to recognize necessity when all other courses have been weighed, though as folly it may appear to those who cling to false hope. Well, let folly be our cloak, a veil before the eyes of the enemy, for he is very wise and weighs all things to a nicety in the scales of his malice. But the only measure that he knows is desire for power, and so he judges all hearts. Into his heart thought will not enter it that any will refuse it, that having the ring we may seek to destroy it. If we seek this, we shall put him out of reckoning. At least for a while, said Elrond. The road must be trod, but it will be very hard, and neither strength nor wisdom will carry us far upon it. This quest may be attempted by the weak with as much hope as the strong. Yet such is oft the course of deeds that move the wheels of the world. Small hands do them because they must, while the eyes of the great are elsewhere. Very well, Master Elrond, said Bilbo suddenly. Say no more. It is plain enough what you're pointing at. Bilbo the silly hobbit started this affair, and Bilbo had better finish it off, or himself. I was very comfortable here and getting on with my book, if you want to know. I'm just writing an ending for it. I had thought of putting, and he lived happily ever after at the end of his days. It is a good ending, and none the worse for having been used before. Now I shall have to alter that. It does not look like it's coming true. And anyway, there will evidently have to be several more chapters if I live to write them. It is a frightful nonsense. When do I start? Boromir looked in surprise at Bilbo, but the laughter died on his lips when he saw that all the others regarded the old hobbit with grave respect. Only Gloin smiled, but his smile came from old memories. Of course, my dear Bilbo, said Gandalf. If you had really started this affair, you might be expected to finish it, but you know very well enough that starting is too great a claim for any, and that only a small part is played in great deeds by any hero. You need not bow. Though the word was meant, we do not doubt that under jest you are making a valiant offer, but one beyond your strength, Bilbo. You cannot take this thing back. It has passed on. If you need my advice any longer, I should say that your part is ended, unless as a recorder. Finish your book, and leave the ending unaltered. There is still hope for it. But get ready to write a sequel when they come back. Bilbo laughed. I have never known you to give me pleasant advice before, he said. As all your unpleasant advice has been good, I wonder if this advice is not bad. Still, I don't suppose I have the strength or luck left to deal with the ring. It has grown, and I have not. But tell me, what do you mean by they? The messengers who are sent with the ring. Exactly, and who are they to be? That seems to me what this council has to decide, and all it has to decide. Elves may thrive on speech alone, and dwarves endure great weariness, but I am only an old hobbit, and I miss my meal at noon. Can't you think of some names now, or put it off till after dinner? No one answered. The noon bell rang. Still no one spoke. Frodo glanced at all the I have to drink water. I actually have done a little bit of voice acting. Thank you for that. Unfortunately, the project that I voice acted in never came to fruition. But I was in a Resident Evil animated film that never was released, unfortunately. All right. No one answered. The noon bell rang. Still no one spoke. Frodo glanced at all the faces, but they were not turned to him. All the council sat with downcast eyes as if in deep thought. A great dread fell on him as he was awaiting the pronouncement of some doom that he had long foreseen and vainly hoped, after all, never be spoken. An overwhelming longing to rest and remain at peace by Bilbo's side in Rivendell filled all his heart. At last, with an effort, he spoke, and wondered to hear his own words, as if some other will was using his small voice. I will take the ring, he said, though I do not know the way. Elrond raised his eyes and looked at him, and Frodo felt his heart pierced by the sudden keenness of the glance. If I understand aright all that I have heard, he said, I think that this task is appointed for you, Frodo, and that if you do not find a way, no one will. This is the hour of the Shire folk, when they arise from their quiet fields to shake the towers and councils of the great. Who of all the wise could have foreseen it? Or if they are wise, why should they expect to know it until the hour is struck? But it is a heavy burden, so heavy that none could lay it on another. I do not lay it on you. But if you take it freely, I will say that your choice is right. And though all the mighty elf friends of old, Hador, and Hurin, and Turin, and Beren himself were assembled together, your seat should be among them. But you won't send him off alone, surely, master, cried Sam, unable to contain himself any longer, and jumping up from the corner where he had been quietly sitting on the floor. No, indeed, said Elrond, turning toward him with a smile. You, at least, shall go with him. It is hardly possible to separate you from him, even when he is summoned to a secret council and you are not. Sam sat down, blushing and muttering. A nice pickle we've landed ourselves in, Mr. Frodo, he said, shaking his head. And that is, at last, the end of the chapter. I kind of figured we were going to only get through one chapter today, because the Council of Elrond is a long, long chapter, and there's so much to talk about. In that last bit, I have to say I've always loved that they're talking about destroying the ring and going to Mordor, and Bilbo just suddenly leaps up. All right, I'll do it. You know. And thank you. And Gandalf had said, look, sit down. You're too old. You already had the ring for way too long. Relax. Nobody's expecting you to go. And what's interesting is that, Frodo, of course, speaks up. He says that he feels that another will is using his voice. And Elrond says to him, look, I'm not telling anyone that they have to go. But if you're volunteering, then I'm going to support that. And, of course, Elrond comes up with the idea of there being 9 walkers and comes up with who's going to be there. And there's a bit of an argument because he doesn't want Merry and Pippin to go. That's for the next chapter. And the next time we stream, we'll talk about that. And why he was wrong, of course, and that Merry and Pippin had to go. But it goes back to an earlier version of the story where Tolkien was playing with the idea that Glorfindel and one other elf was going to go. And some people think, because Elrond says that he was planning on sending 2 elves, he never says who, that Merry and Pippin basically replaced Glorfindel and another elf in the story. But actually Glorfindel's replacement in the writing was actually Legolas, because Tolkien felt that sending Glorfindel would be like sending two Gandalfs at that point because of his power and his majesty. And that's also why Galdor was decided to be a different Galdor than the one that's in The Fall of Gondolin, because if he was the same guy, then he would also be as grand as Glorfindel is. Glorfindel at this point is like the greatest of all the elves. I know a lot of people say Galadriel is the greatest of all the elves, and she kind of is at this point, because when we say Glorfindel is the greatest, it's tempered by the fact that Mogul, could you ban that guy on the Twitch side? We have a spammer. Can you get rid of that, please? It's tempered by the fact that Glorfindel's power is not natural to him. It was gifted to him by Manwë. And sort of the other end of that is the Witch King, who was gifted power by Sauron. And it's interesting that when you read Tolkien's letters, the phrases that he uses to describe Glorfindel and the Witch King is Mogul still there? Hold on. Either Mogul or Wayne, either of my mods on Twitch, could you get rid of that? They're putting a fraudulent link in the chat. If it's not gone in a few minutes, I'll get rid of it. But anyway, when he speaks of Glorfindel, hey Jawsome Sauce, he says that Glorfindel was given additional angelic power. And when he speaks of the Witch King, it was additional demonic force. And I think that these very similar phrasings make them two sides of the same coin. The prophecy of the Witch King's death, long off is his end, and not by the hand of man. That was made by Glorfindel. So, there's sort of two sides to the same coin. And I think that originally Tolkien wanted Glorfindel to come along because he wanted Glorfindel to fight the Witch King. But the way that he did it was better, having Eowyn and Merry do it way better. Like one of the best scenes. All right, I'll get rid of that. I'll get rid of that guy. Hold on. That's... It even says account is suspended. Okay. So... Before I even banned him from the chat, he's already been banned from Twitch. But I'm still going to get rid of the message so that nobody accidentally clicks that link and gets their account hacked. We don't want that to happen. And never click any links that you don't trust. But the link on the Twitch, on the YouTube side that my moderator just placed is a link that you should trust because that goes to my Discord. And if you're interested in hanging out on Discord, we have a pretty fun and lively community there. It is not a Tolkien community, but we do talk about Tolkien stuff. It's just a general, just fun community that we have. Anyway, yeah. I just said, I love that the way that Bilbo's like, all right, I'll do it, Of course, we know now Frodo is going, and it's really interesting to find out at the very end of that chapter that Sam was sitting there the whole time and nobody knew about it. Like, all of these guys with their wisdom and their perceptiveness, Elrond with his Ring of Power, Gandalf with his Ring of Power, and what he calls his Wizard's Eye as well. William Stone is my moderator. They're giving good links. That's a good friend of mine. It was on the other chat, the Twitch chat, that somebody came in and posted a fraudulent link, and I got rid of it already, so it's okay. Just lost my train of thought there. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, nobody notices Sam. Or I prefer to think that maybe Gandalf knew that Sam was there and just kind of didn't say anything, But Sam was there the whole time and nobody knew about it, And I think that, Elrond says it in a way that makes it seem like Sam is there because he can't be separated from Frodo. That he has to be around Frodo, even if Frodo is invited to a secret council and he's not. And actually, what you said there, that it's a joke, what you said, but it's also true. It's also true. You're not wrong about hobbits having a bonus to sneak. In The Hobbit, where's The Hobbit? Oh, it's the Two Towers. Oh, here it is. There's a section at the beginning that talks about hobbits and what they can do. And it mentions, I'm not going to read it, but it mentions that they're very hard to see if they don't want to be seen. They move very quietly. They're just quiet, stealthy creatures that are very good at not being noticed, which is important for the quest that's about to happen, as it was important for Bilbo's quest as well, that had already happened. But I think that the reason that Sam is there is not because he just can't be away from Frodo. I think the reason that Sam is there is because Merry put him up to it. A lot of the things that Sam did in the early chapters were Merry put him up to it. Why was Sam spying on Frodo and Gandalf? Why was he eavesdropping? I ain't dropping no eaves, sir, honest, Merry put him up to it. We learned that in the chapter where they're in Crick Hollow and Conspiracy Unmasked, But anyway, that was our reading for the day. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to support the channel, if you're watching the stream and you're not subscribed, I urge you to hit the subscribe button. If you got a little bit of money that you don't mind spending, become a member. You get to see all the videos at least a week early, sometimes more so. And you get some emotes and you get that cool G rune that's next to some people's names in the chat, which is really cool. Of course, the chat that shows up on the screen has a different, it's like a little $sign or something, but that's different. But anyway, the next time that we stream, well, I stream every day on Twitch. So if you follow me on Twitch, I'll be playing Dragon Quest III tomorrow afternoon. But the next YouTube stream will be 2 weeks from now, on Thursday the 6th. It will be our next meeting of the Council of Tolkien. So let me just go over to that actually briefly. We'll be over here. It'll be a different background, and I'll have Sid and Matt with me. So, you know, that's what we'll be doing then. And then the next reading stream, let me look at my calendar here. I will probably announce it then, but it will likely be the 20th of March. That is the likely date. It may be subject to change. Keep an eye on the community tab. Of course, if you're in the Discord, all changes are always said there first, and I have a schedule up there as well. But that is the likely next reading stream. I may do them more often at some point because this has been a great success in terms of views and chat and everything like that. We've had a lot of people in chat. This has been a lot of fun. So I'm going to stop the recording section here, and that will be the video that goes up on YouTube. So we'll stop the recording here. For those of you that are on Twitch and are watching me on Twitch and want to know about the gaming streams and what is going to be going on for the next week or so, let me head over here. I mentioned it already, but tomorrow I will be playing Dragon Quest III. You demand a YouTube stream tomorrow? I'm sorry, I will be on Twitch tomorrow, though. It's twitch.tv/necrovmx. Tomorrow, starting at around 12:30 Eastern, I'll be playing Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake. Saturday night, we'll be playing Xenoblade Chronicles 2 for the Switch. Sunday night, Castlevania Lords of Shadows 2 for Steam. Monday afternoon, if you want to hear me curse some more, I'll be playing Guilty Gear Strive for Steam. Actually, I've been enjoying this game greatly. Tuesday, we just started this new thing, Death's Gambit Afterlife. Really cool game. Interesting story. Love the mechanics. That's really cool. I'm playing that Tuesday night. Wednesday afternoon, more of East 10 Nordics. And then Thursday night, we have a different podcast. We're going to be doing the List Critics Remastered with me and Jesse and Elise. So anyway, let's head over here because we're going to be ending. I say goodnight to everyone on YouTube. Now, I don't know how raids work in relay. I don't think I could raid somebody on YouTube, but for the Twitch audience, we'll be taking you guys along to somebody. And for the YouTube audience, we'll just be saying goodnight to everybody on YouTube. Who are we going to raid to? Oh, Professor Corey Olsen is streaming. So for those of you who are on the Twitch, I'm going to send you over to Corey Olsen. He's streaming. What is he doing right now? He's doing the Silmarillion Fan Project Season 7, Session 26. Yep. So let's raid him. Okay. So that's in. So anybody who's watching on Twitch is going to be shunted along to Professor Olsen. For those of you on YouTube, good night. I enjoyed this. I loved it. So Professor Corey Olsen, he's another Tolkien scholar. So we'll see you guys over there. I'll see you guys tomorrow for Dragon Quest. I'll see you on Discord. I'll see you in 2 weeks for Council of Tolkien with Matt and Sid. Here we go.